Welcome back to Paranormal M. I hope you're doing well, and I'm glad you're here for another video. Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Tonight's first story is more about thoughts on death, energy, and what might happen after this life. So, it's a little different from the usual ghost story. But I think it fits here because it still touches that unknown place we're all curious about. So get comfortable, relax, and I hope you all sleep well tonight. Honestly, I used to avoid thinking about death completely. It made me uneasy in a way I couldn't really explain. I think what scared me most wasn't death itself, but the unknown. That question of what happens after this life. Over time, though, something shifted in me. I started feeling like there's this bigger awakening happening around us. Like more and more people are becoming aware that life is not just what we can see, touch, and explain. And I believe when you truly start searching for answers, life starts leaving little clues for you. You just have to learn how to notice them. For me, a lot of those clues came through podcasts, stories, spiritual conversations, and learning more about the paranormal. I've realized there is so much we don't understand, and maybe we're not meant to have every answer right away. I don't really connect with organized religion. To me, it often feels like it closes people off instead of opening them up. I believe something sacred exists, but I find it more in the earth, in nature, in community, in love, and in connection. I think we've been pulled away from that in so many ways. I believe we are energy. I believe we are consciousness living inside a body for a while, almost like this body is the vehicle, not the whole self. And I don't think this is the first lifetime for everyone. Some souls have been here before. Some of us may even come back with the same people again and again, learning different lessons together. I also believe that before we come here, we're shown possible paths. We choose certain lessons, certain families, certain challenges. Not because everything is supposed to be easy, but because we are here to grow, to experience, to learn, and sometimes to help change things. But I don't think that means our actions don't matter. They absolutely do. I don't believe in heaven and hell in the traditional sense. I think those ideas were created by people and often used to control people. What I believe is that when we leave this body, we go through some kind of review. We see our life clearly. We feel the love we gave, and we also feel the pain we caused. Not just from our own perspective, but from the perspective of the people we affected. And I do think there are consequences after this life. People who caused deep harm may have to face that energy in a very real way. Maybe they relive what they created. Maybe they sit with it until they truly understand it. Maybe some souls get stuck because they can't let go of their pain, guilt, anger, or suffering. But I don't believe religion is some golden ticket to a perfect afterlife. I don't think it works like that. I think what matters is who you are, how you love, how you treat people, and what kind of energy you leave behind. And when I look at the world, I can't help but question things. Why would some people get to live in comfort, power, and luxury here on Earth, while others are told to suffer quietly and wait for heaven after they die? That never felt right to me. It feels unfair. It feels oppressive. Some people create suffering here while living in their own version of heaven. When you listen to stories about children remembering past lives, near-death experiences, deep meditation, telepathy, or people having spiritual experiences with plant medicine in safe and intentional settings, it becomes hard to believe that this life is all there is. There is so much more happening than most of us realize. I think if we keep an open heart and an open mind, and if we try to live with love, certain doors begin to open. Not all at once, and not always in a dramatic way. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just a feeling, a knowing. And I'm actually proud of myself for getting to this place. Death used to terrify me. I couldn't sit with it. I couldn't talk about it. But now, I don't feel that same fear. In a strange way, I feel peaceful about it, maybe even curious. I don't see death as the end anymore. I see it as a doorway. And while we're here, I really think the most important thing is simple. Be kind. Be loving. Be good to people. That's what matters. Honestly, I've got two stories. One happened when I was completely alone, and the other happened when there were enough of us there that I still can't brush it off. The first one happened during my first year of college. I was home one evening, sitting at the dining room table, trying to get through some calculus homework. My parents' place had this open layout, so the dining room looked straight into the living room. And if you sat at the end of the table, like I was doing, your back was toward the living room and this huge window that went almost from the floor to the ceiling. So I'm sitting there, pencil in hand, staring at numbers, and then, suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, I felt this wave of fear hit me. Not nervousness, not a little chill. Fear. It was the kind of fear that feels like your whole body knows something before your brain does. I had this immediate thought that if I stayed in that chair for even one more second, something terrible was going to happen. And at the exact same time, I saw something in my mind so clearly it felt less like imagination and more like a warning. I pictured this tall, twisted thing standing behind me, somewhere between me and the window. It looked partly human, partly goat, with this awful stillness to it, just staring at the back of my head. I didn't turn around. I didn't check. I just got up and rushed straight into the kitchen where my mom was making dinner. And the second I stepped out of that dining room, the fear disappeared. Completely. Like someone had snapped a cord. I've never been especially religious. I don't really believe in heaven or hell, and I've always been pretty skeptical about ghosts and paranormal stories. But that moment shook me badly enough that I can't fully close the door on the idea that there may be things around us we don't understand. And the strange thing is, that house had a history of odd things happening. My mom and my stepdad Ron experienced things too. And Ron is not the type to believe in anything supernatural. He's the kind of person who wants a logical explanation for everything, but even he couldn't explain some of it. One morning, we found the attic door open. That might not sound like much, but this door was heavy. Really heavy. It was hard to pull open even when you meant to. The night before, my mom had woken up to the sound of a man's voice coming from the corner of the bedroom, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. The attic door was just outside that room, right above the hallway. There were other things too. When I was home alone, I heard my name being called from the bedroom more than once. Sometimes it sounded like a man, sometimes like a woman. It happened enough times that I stopped trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. One night, I woke up and saw a dark figure standing beside my bed. It looked about 6 feet tall, wearing something long, almost like an old coat, and what looked like a hunter-style cap. I was so scared I pulled the blanket over my head and stayed frozen there until I fell back asleep. About an hour later, I woke up again and peeked out. It was still there. By morning, it was gone. We used to hear footsteps in the hallway outside the bedrooms when everyone was already in bed. Things would disappear for weeks, sometimes months, and then show up in places nobody would have put them. A couple of times, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of books sliding in and out on my bookshelf. It was such a specific sound, and I could never recreate it any other way. Part of me still wonders if some of it could have been sleep confusion or hallucinations. I'm open to that. But when everyone in the house has their own version of something strange happening, it gets harder to laugh it all away. The second story happened when I was about 15. We were out at my parents' lake property one night having a bonfire. It was my mom, Ron, my stepbrother, his girlfriend, my best friend, 2 family friends, and me. We were all sitting around the fire in a circle, and from where most of us were sitting, we could see the driveway about 50 feet away. At some point, my mom looked past the fire toward the driveway and said, "Who is that standing over there?" So the rest of us looked, and there, beside my mom's car, was the shadow of a man. Not a vague shape, not a trick of smoke, a man. And the thing is, it looked exactly like my granddad, who had passed away only a few weeks earlier. Nobody jumped up, nobody screamed. We just kind of sat there, staring, trying to understand what we were seeing. I still don't know what to call any of it. Maybe there are explanations. Maybe there aren't. But those moments have stayed with me. And even now, when I think back on that house, or that figure by the driveway, I get the same feeling I had that night at the dining room table. Like something was there. And it knew we could sense it. I work in this old former church that was built sometime in the early 1930s, with a newer section added on in the late 1960s. These days, it's a thrift shop, but you can still feel what the building used to be. It has that quiet, heavy kind of air old churches have, especially in the basement. Years ago, they held funerals there, and the organization I work for was started back in the 1950s by a woman who really poured her heart into it. She's passed on now, of course, but people still talk about how proud she was of what she built. I think that matters. At first, it was little things. My music would randomly cut out. The speaker system would shut off right in the middle of a song, just like someone had pulled the plug. It wasn't terrifying, exactly. More annoying than anything, but it happened enough that I started noticing. Then, last summer, something happened that I still think about. I'm 42, and up until that day, I had never seen anything in my life that I would call paranormal. I was downstairs in the basement by myself, grabbing donations to bring up to the sales floor. My coworker was upstairs helping customers, so I knew nobody else was down there with me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, this dark gray shape moved right past me. Fast. It was almost like a shadow, but thicker, more solid somehow. It passed close enough that I immediately froze. I didn't feel evil from it. I didn't feel threatened. I was just shocked. My brain kept trying to make it into a person, but there was no person there. I told my coworker what happened, and she believed me. But I didn't tell many other people because my manager doesn't believe in that kind of thing, and I didn't want to get labeled as the weird one at work. About 4 months passed before anything else big happened. One evening, around 7, I closed the store. I locked everything, checked the doors, checked the windows, did the whole routine. It was November, cold outside, and the building doesn't have proper heat, so there was absolutely no reason for any window to be open. The next morning, and asked why I had left a window open. I told her I didn't. I said I knew I had checked everything before I left. But then she said the security camera had sent her a notification at 7:20, saying a window had been opened. That really bothered me, because I had left only a minute or so before that. For a second, I even started questioning myself. You know how your mind does that? Like, maybe I missed it. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I'm losing it. But no, I remembered walking around and checking those windows. A little while later, my manager texted me again and said something like, "Well, then I think it's a ghost." Because the camera had actually caught the window opening. The motion light went off at the same time too. She sent me the clip and there it was. That was the moment when it stopped feeling like random little odd things and started feeling real. There's honestly a lot more I could tell, but the strangest part was what happened after that. The very next day, I felt like something had followed me home. Right before my shift, I had this sudden, awful panic come over me. It didn't feel normal. I felt dizzy, terrified, and completely unlike myself. I couldn't make myself leave the house. It was like my body knew something was wrong before my mind could explain it. Then things started happening at home too, and I wasn't the only one noticing them. Other people saw or felt things. And one night, my partner had something happen on the drive home that shook him so badly he had to pull over. He was trembling when he called, and he even reported what he saw to the police. Whatever it was, it didn't last forever. After maybe a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, everything slowly faded. The panic lifted. The strange things stopped. I started feeling like myself again. I still don't know exactly what happened. I just know that old building has a history, and I don't think everything inside it is as empty as it looks. So, this happened a few years back, right before an old abandoned house near the edge of town was scheduled to be torn down. People had called it haunted for as long as I could remember. I'd heard all the stories. I'd even had a few strange experiences there before. Little things, like footsteps when nobody was around, that feeling of being watched from another room. But I've always tried to stay grounded. I'm not the kind of person who jumps straight to ghosts. I explore places like that because I'm curious. I want to understand what's there, whether it's history, atmosphere, or something else entirely. That day, I went with 2 friends. One of them, Luca, was with me most of the time. The other one, Maddie, had wandered off by himself, which honestly wasn't unusual for him. He always did that. He'd drift into another room, take his own photos, poke around, then show back up like nothing happened. Luca and I were in the living room for a while. The place was like a time capsule. Old floral furniture, heavy curtains, dusty lamps, little decorative things still sitting exactly where someone had left them years ago. It felt sad more than scary at first, like the house was holding its breath. We made our way upstairs, taking pictures and talking quietly. After a while, Luca called out for Maddie. Nothing. We waited a second, then called again. Still nothing. At first, I figured maybe he'd stepped outside for air. The house smelled damp and stale, and the dust was awful. So I pulled out my phone and sent him a text. "Where are you?" The second I hit send, we heard his phone chime. Not outside. Below us. The house didn't have power, and it was way out in a quiet area, so that sound cut right through everything. Luca and I looked at each other, and then we headed downstairs, calling Maddie's name as we went. We followed the sound down into the basement, and there he was. He was standing in front of this old brick wall, just staring at it. Not looking around, not taking pictures, just staring. And he was rocking slowly, back and forth, like he wasn't really there. I said his name. Luca said it too. No reaction. Then Luca stepped forward and put a hand on his shoulder. Maddie snapped out of it so suddenly that it made both of us jump. He looked confused, almost embarrassed, like he'd just woken up in a place he didn't recognize. The basement felt awful. Heavy, cold, and wrong in a way I can't really explain. So we told him we were done and that we should get out for a bit. On the walk back to my place, Maddie didn't say a word, and that was not like him. He was usually loud, always joking, always talking with his hands, always digging around in his pockets for cigarettes or a lighter or loose change. But this time, nothing. He just walked beside us, completely blank. I asked him if he was okay. He nodded, but he still didn't speak. When we got back to my house, Luca and I went inside. Maddie stayed out front, smoking in the quiet. In the kitchen, Luca looked at me and said, "Maddie's acting really weird, right?" I said, "Yeah, I hope he's okay." Then Luca, who always believed in that kind of stuff more than I did, half joked, "I hope he didn't bring something back with him." And from directly behind us, we heard Maddie say, "What are you two talking about?" I cannot explain how badly that scared us. He had come through the front door and walked all the way into the kitchen without making a sound. That should have been impossible. My front door was metal and loud, and the floorboards creaked everywhere. And Maddie was not a quiet person. He usually moved like every object in a room had personally challenged him. But he was just there, standing behind us, and his eyes looked wrong. Dark. Too dark. I know how that sounds, but I remember it clearly. His face had this strange little smile on it too, not friendly, not funny. Like he knew something we didn't. I don't know what happened to him that day. I didn't see much of him after that. But I still think about him standing in that basement, rocking in front of that brick wall. And I still think about how he got into my kitchen without making a single sound. When I was younger, my brother Callan and I used to experience strange things in our house all the time. And I know people say that kind of thing casually, but this was regular enough that we actually had a routine around it. Every night, when it started getting close to 3 a.m., one of us would usually warn the other. Not in a joking way either, more like, "Hey, it's almost 3. Be careful." Because almost every single night, right around that exact time, something would happen. There were odd little things during the day too. Sounds, movements, that feeling of someone being nearby when nobody was there. But 3 a.m. was different. That was when the house seemed to wake up. There were a bunch of nights where Callan would be out in the living room playing Xbox while I was already in bed. Then, suddenly I'd hear him tearing down the hallway, and he'd dive into my bed and pull the covers over himself. He'd be shaking, telling me he heard footsteps coming toward him from the other end of the house. One night, that happened again. He ran in, completely terrified, and climbed into my bed. A few seconds later, we heard this huge crash from his bedroom. He started crying right away, and I remember trying to shush him, probably more harshly than I should have. I wasn't mad at him. I was scared too. I just had this awful thought that if he made too much noise, whatever was out there might notice exactly where we were. Eventually, we got enough courage to check his room. He had this old bass guitar hanging on the wall. It had been there for years, and he barely touched it. When we opened the door, the bass was on the floor, and papers were scattered absolutely everywhere. Across his desk, his bed, the carpet, the dresser, even partly inside the closet. The weirdest part was that our mom had cleaned his room earlier that day. It had not looked like that. Something strange used to happen to me during the day, too. At least once a week, I'd be sitting at my computer with my back facing my bedroom door, playing a game, and I'd hear footsteps on the carpet behind me. Then I'd hear my mattress creak, like someone had walked in and sat down on the corner of my bed. My mom used to do that sometimes, just sit and watch me play. So without turning around, I'd say, "Hi, Mom." But there would be no answer. Then I'd turn around, and nobody would be there. The bed would be empty. The room would feel completely still. Another time, Callan told me he kept hearing scratching inside the wall. I thought maybe it was mice or something, so I went to listen. But the strange thing was, you could see both sides of that wall. There wasn't really anywhere for an animal to be hiding. I put my ear against it anyway. And then, there was this massive bang from inside the wall, like somebody had punched it from the other side. We just stared at each other for half a second, both of us trying to understand what had just happened. And then, we ran out of the room. There was also one night when I was in my bedroom and I heard my dad call my name, clear as day, loud enough that I got up and went to find him. But when I got to his room, he was asleep, fully asleep, snoring. The thing that still bothers me the most, though, is what happened later in my dad's old childhood room. It was the only time in my life I ever had sleep paralysis. I was lying on my back, and it felt like I was awake, but my eyes were shut and I couldn't really move. Then suddenly, it was like there was a flashing light right in front of my face, blinking faster and faster. The light got stronger, and then it turned red. I couldn't move my head, but somehow I managed to jerk my body onto my side. And that's when I saw her. There was an old woman sitting in a rocking chair, just watching me. She was knitting with red yarn. She didn't speak. She didn't move toward me. She just sat there, rocking gently, like she had been waiting. When I got home, I told my parents what happened. My dad got quiet. Then he told me that when he was a kid, he had experienced the exact same thing in that exact same room. At first, I thought he was messing with me, but then he started describing her, what she was wearing, the rocking chair, the red yarn, everything. And honestly, I still don't know what to make of any of it. I just know that house had something in it, and whatever it was, it seemed to know when we were listening. For a little over a year, I've been feeling something curl up beside me when I'm in bed, either when I'm trying to sleep or when I'm lying there watching a show. The first time it happened, I honestly thought it might have been my cat's spirit visiting me. I've always believed animals can come back to comfort us, and at first, that's exactly what it felt like. Gentle, familiar, almost loving. But over time, that feeling changed. Now it doesn't feel comforting anymore. It feels pushy, angry, and almost possessive. When I ignore it, or when I refuse to let it touch me, or when I tell it firmly to leave, it seems to react badly. It stays close to my side, almost constantly. I even had a priest come to bless my home. Since then, I've been praying more, reading scripture, and trying to keep myself grounded. But this presence still feels like it's there. Sometimes it sends this strange surge through me, almost like a jolt of energy. It affects my heartbeat and makes me feel like I'm having a massive adrenaline rush. Other times, it feels like it's underneath me somehow, making it uncomfortable to lie flat. The first time that happened, I shouted at it. I told it to stop. I was scared, but I was also furious, and I demanded that it leave me alone. But it didn't leave. If anything, it feels like it became angry with me. Since then, I've had strange heart sensations, waves of heat, and feelings that are very close to severe anxiety. Looking back, I remember that I started having panic attacks out of nowhere last spring. The odd thing was, whenever I got in the car and went for a drive, the feelings would ease up. At the time, I didn't understand why. Now, I feel like I may know what was behind it. I've had paranormal experiences throughout my life. I've seen things I couldn't explain, including ghosts, but I won't go into all of that right now. What matters is that I'm frightened. I can't seem to make this thing go away. One night, it felt like it attacked me. It was like it had attached itself to my back, sending those same surges through me and causing intense hot flashes. I barely slept for 2 nights after that. I went to the Catholic Church for help, and they have been helping me. I'm grateful for that. But even with their support, I still feel like this thing is lingering. A few nights ago, I stayed in a hotel so my house could be blessed again, and so I could try to rest somewhere else. At first, It didn't seem to be with me there, though I still noticed a few strange things. The next night, I went back home. It was still there, but it didn't feel quite as strong. Then I returned to the hotel again, hoping I could finally sleep. But this time, it felt like it had followed me. That crushed me. I realized I couldn't just run from it. Now I feel like I have to face it, and honestly, that terrifies me. I keep asking myself how this happened. Why me? Why now? It feels like the kind of thing people only expect to see in movies. So I'll say this to anyone who ever feels something unseen cuddling up beside them, even if it feels loving at first. Please be careful. If it really is the spirit of a beloved pet or someone who loved you, I believe they would respect your boundaries. They would understand if you asked them to move on. Some of my other experiences involved being touched in ways that felt deeply wrong, and I'm starting to wonder if all of it may be connected to the same presence. I still remember that December so clearly. I had gone to stay at my aunt's house for winter break, and at first, it felt like any ordinary visit. Cold nights, late studying, cousins around the house, that quiet holiday feeling. My uncle had passed away about a year before all of this happened, so the house already carried a kind of heaviness. Not sadness exactly, but something still and watchful. I used to sleep in one room with my cousin Nira. My younger cousin Sam slept in the other room with my aunt. Nira had this habit of falling asleep with earphones in every night, music still playing softly. I always thought it was strange, but I never asked much about it. One night, around 11, I was still awake studying. Nira was lying nearby with her earphones in, and my aunt had already gone to bed. Maybe 30 minutes later, I heard my aunt call me. Clear as anything. I got up and went to her room. The lights were off and the whole room was completely dark. I called back, asking if she had called me, but no one answered. So I stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. I told myself I must have imagined it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe my ears were playing tricks on me. I went back to bed and tried not to think about it. But the next night, I couldn't stop thinking about that voice. I knew what I had heard. It wasn't a random sound. It was my aunt's voice calling me. At that time, I didn't really believe in ghosts or anything like that. But the thought still came into my mind. What if something in that house was copying her voice? I told Nira about it. She looked at me carefully and asked, "Are you sure you heard someone call you?" I said, "Yes, I'm sure." Then she told me, very seriously, "If you ever hear something like that again, don't leave the room. Just wake me up. Stay inside." I asked her why. She only said, "Just do what I'm telling you." After that, she turned over and went to sleep. A few nights later, I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. I heard the door near the hallway opening. At first, I thought it was their dog wandering around, but then I remembered the dog was sleeping right beside me. So I sat up to see who was there, and that's when I saw the door opening by itself, slowly. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind, but all the windows were closed. The doors were shut. There was no breeze. No explanation. A cold feeling went through my whole body. That was the first time I truly felt like I was seeing something paranormal happen right in front of me. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just pulled the blanket over myself and held it as tightly as I could. Like that thin piece of cloth could protect me from whatever was outside. The next day, I told Nira. She just stared at me. She didn't say a word. After that, almost every night, I started hearing strange thumping sounds from the floor above us. Heavy footsteps. Sometimes slow, sometimes sharp. Like someone walking around when everyone was asleep. Then, after some time, nothing much happened again. My winter break ended, and I went back home. Later, I told my grandmother everything. She had lived with my aunt for a while after my uncle died, so I thought maybe she would laugh it off. She didn't. She told me she had heard things too, and she had seen things. One night, she said she was lying in bed in that same house. The lights were off, and the room was dark. Sam was also there, using his phone. My grandmother woke up and noticed the door wasn't fully closed. Through the thin gap, she saw someone standing there. Someone with white hair, just staring into the room. She asked Sam, "What was that?" He said he had seen a shadow too, but when she looked again, it was gone. Another time, everyone was watching TV before bed. Sam suddenly told my grandmother that his sister was hitting herself against the wall. My grandmother turned to him and asked, "Who? Where?" He pointed across the room, but his sister was sleeping right beside him on the bed. Something similar happened again. One night, my grandmother woke up and saw Sam curled tightly inside a blanket. That was unusual for him because he never slept like that. He usually spread out across the whole bed. She pulled the blanket back and saw that he was sweating, terrified, and shaking. She asked him, "What happened? Why are you scared?" He said, "Nothing." But the next morning, he finally told her. He said that before she woke up, he had seen his sister standing in the middle of the room. Her hair was neatly styled. She was dressed nicely, almost too perfectly, and she was just staring at him with a blank expression. Then he looked beside him. His sister was still asleep there. Another time, Sam saw an old woman standing in the middle of the living room, dressed completely in white. He ran to tell his mother, but when they came back, she was gone. Even my aunt had experiences. She told me that sometimes she heard voices under the staircase. Not one voice, but several. She said once, long ago, when all the kids were at school and she was alone in the house, she heard two men and a woman talking to each other. She couldn't understand what they were saying, but the voices were clear. Then one winter night, Nira was sleeping alone with the lights on. She suddenly felt like she couldn't breathe, like something was pressing down on her throat. She said it felt as if someone was trying to choke her. Half asleep, terrified, she started praying. When she opened her eyes, she saw a dark, cloud-like shape fading away inside the room. But the scariest thing happened later. One night, Nira saw 5 cats sitting on top of the closet. They didn't own any cats. That same night, my aunt woke up to go to the bathroom. As she turned, half asleep, she saw an arm holding her hand. The skin was pale, almost completely white, like an old person's arm. The nails were long and red. She was too sleepy and confused to react properly, so she just went to the bathroom and came back to bed. 2 days later, she told Sam about it. He went quiet. Then he said that on that very same morning, he had woken up with strange bite marks on his arm. Looking back, I think I always felt something strange in that house, even before any of this happened. Since childhood, whenever I visited, there was this heavy silence there. Not normal silence, more like the house was listening. I used to tell myself it was just my imagination, but later, my own sister told me she felt the same thing whenever she visited, like someone else was living there with them. The last thing I remember hearing happened when Nira came to stay with us for a few days. One night, around 11, her brother called her. He said he was sleeping in her room back at their house, and he could hear noises from the floor above. At first, it sounded like someone stamping their foot. Then, as the night went on, it became louder, almost like someone was dancing upstairs. And the worst part was, it didn't sound random. It sounded like whoever was up there wanted to be heard. So this happened around this time last year, and I still think about it more than I probably should. I live way out in rural Appalachia, but I want to say right away, this isn't one of those usual mountain ghost stories. My place is set up a little oddly. My house sits closest to the road, then there's a small apartment behind it, and past that are a few neighbors. and then it's just woods. I've been told by more than one person that the woods behind our homes used to be some kind of old sacred gathering spot. From what anybody knows, no tribe actually lived there permanently, and nobody is supposed to be buried there. But still, it has that feeling to it. I'm Native Alaskan myself, and honestly, between respecting the land and being nervous about coyotes, I've never gone wandering back there. I just leave those woods alone. That night, my fiancé and I had just gotten off work. We stopped at a fast food place about an hour from home, near where we both work, just to grab something quick. When we were walking back to the car, we saw this tiny kitten trying to get inside the restaurant. It was late, traffic was loud, cars were everywhere, and I just couldn't leave it there. So we scooped that baby up and brought it home. At the time, we were renting the little apartment behind our house to some friends. I'll call them Marin and Denny. They lived there with their 3-month-old baby and their cat. As soon as we got home, I wrapped the kitten in a blanket because I had to show them what we found. When I walked up toward the apartment, I saw their cat sitting in the window, staring down at us. He started meowing, and of course I said, "Hi, kitty kitty. Hi, mister." And I swear to you, clear as anything, a little girl's voice said, "Hi," right back. I froze. It was about 10 o'clock at night. No little girls lived near me. None. I stood there trying to listen, trying to figure out where it came from. I couldn't hear a TV inside the apartment. I couldn't hear anyone talking. Nothing. Then I looked at my fiancé, and he looked just as scared as I felt. I kept whispering, "What was that? Did you hear that?" And he was so freaked out that he just told me to stop talking and come on, then practically pulled me up the stairs to the apartment. We knocked, and when Marin and Denny answered, I knew instantly it hadn't been them. Denny was in the kitchen cooking, no phone playing, no TV on. Marin was in the bedroom trying to get the baby to sleep, and it was completely quiet in there. I asked my fiancé to explain what happened, and he said he heard the voice from underneath the stairs, but I heard it from around the side of our house. That's the part that still gets me. We both heard it, but from different places. I've told people this story, and most of them just say, "That's creepy," or "That's weird," but I haven't been able to let it go. I can still hear her voice in my head. It wasn't angry. It didn't sound mean. It honestly sounded like a little girl excited to say hello. But knowing she was there is what scares me. I never felt like my house was haunted. Nothing moves on its own. My animals don't act strange inside. There aren't footsteps or knocks or anything like that. Inside feels normal. Outside is different. I used to love natural light, but now I don't even like having the blinds open during the day, and definitely not at night. When I take the dogs out after dark, I stay right on the porch. Sometimes, when I get brave enough to walk around the yard at night, I feel like someone is watching me. Sometimes it scares me, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it feels like nobody is there at all. Part of me wonders if she really was just a little ghost girl who heard me talking to the cats and thought I was talking to her. And another part of me feels guilty for running away. I've tried researching the property, but I haven't found much. I don't know who she is, or why she's there, or if there's more than just her out there. I don't know if I should try to reach out somehow, or if leaving it alone is the smarter thing to do. All I know is, I don't want to be scared of my own yard forever. I've been sitting with this story for a while, and honestly, I still don't know exactly what to make of it. I've told a few close friends, but I wanted to share it properly because maybe someone listening has a theory, or has dealt with something even remotely similar. Before I get into the house itself, I should probably say that this wasn't my first brush with something I couldn't explain. When I was a kid, not long after my mom passed away, I felt someone place a hand on my shoulder. It was gentle, almost comforting. Years later, while I was working near a fenced ledge, I felt this sudden hard tug, like someone had grabbed me and tried to pull me backward. Both times, I looked around and nobody was there. So, when my roommates first started talking about noises in the new house, I tried not to jump straight to ghosts. I actually moved in a little later than everyone else because I had injured my hand pretty badly and couldn't help carry anything. By the time I got there, my roommates had already been hearing footsteps at night, especially above us in the attic. The attic was technically off limits, not really safe to live in, and we were only shown where the key was in case of an emergency. At first, I shrugged it off. Old house, creaky boards, pipes settling, all that. And when I finally moved in, nothing felt strange to me. No weird energy, no noises, no cold spots. It was just a house. Then a couple weeks later, my roommate Len and I were skating around the neighborhood when we saw this old painting leaning against a trash can. It looked gloomy and dramatic in that perfect, "why would anyone bring this home?" kind of way. Naturally, because we were film students and apparently had no survival instinct, we took it. We joked about it being cursed. Haunted painting, student horror film, all the obvious lines. Then we thought it would be funny to put it in our roommate Kira's room while she was gone. She didn't laugh, didn't yell, didn't even really comment. She just quietly carried it downstairs later, which somehow made it feel creepier. Not long after that, I moved into the basement because I was tired of sharing a room. I've always liked basements. They're cool, dark, quiet. For the first week or so, I actually slept better down there than I had in ages. Then I started feeling sick. Nothing dramatic at first, just run down, foggy, kind of heavy. One night, our friend Colin came over. We smoked a little, watched TV, and he joked that he was going to sneak downstairs later and scare me. So, of course, when I went to bed, I was already a little on edge. I finally fell asleep, but I jolted awake almost immediately. I looked across the basement and saw Colin standing right in the middle of the room. I thought, okay, very funny. So I grabbed a pillow and threw it at him as hard as I could. I watched him duck and dart behind this huge beanbag chair we had down there. I got up to call him out, but when I checked behind it, nobody was there. I went upstairs, and there he was on the couch, completely asleep and snoring. I woke him up and asked if he'd been downstairs. He swore he hadn't. I made him promise. Then I called Len, thinking maybe he had come home somehow, but he was across the state visiting family. That scared me, but I tried to explain it away. Maybe it was the weed. Maybe I had dreamed part of it. Maybe I was half awake and my brain filled in the blanks. But then, it happened again. A few days later, I went to sleep in the basement feeling even sicker than before. That same uneasy feeling came over me, like the room had gone still in a way rooms shouldn't. I opened my eyes, and there was Colin again, standing in the center of the basement. I called his name, and he ran off in the same direction as before. This time I went upstairs immediately. Colin wasn't there. Len wasn't there. I checked my phone and saw Colin's location had updated at his house 1 minute earlier. He lived about 15 minutes away and didn't have a car. I called him, panicking, and he basically told me I was being a baby and needed to deal with it. So I talked to Len. I asked if he had seen anything. He said no, but he asked if I was feeling all right. Since I'd been sick, we wondered about carbon monoxide. I'd read that it can make people hallucinate, so we checked the detectors, replaced batteries, made sure everything worked. Nothing. No alarms, no explanation. That night, something changed. For the first time, I didn't see Colin. I saw Len. I thought he'd come home early and walk downstairs to talk, because he was the kind of person who would do that even if I was half asleep. I called out to him, but he ran off in another direction. Right as I grabbed my phone to turn on the flashlight, my phone started ringing. It was Len, calling from outside, asking me to let him in because he was locked out. I hadn't locked any doors. That was the moment I stopped trying to be calm about it. I was sick, exhausted, and starting to feel like the house was messing with my head on purpose. I went to the ER. They ran several tests and couldn't find anything wrong. I needed a break, so the next night I stayed at my friend Mira's place. Around 2 in the morning, while I was asleep on her floor, Mira got a call from Len. He asked if I had left her house. She sent him a picture of me passed out on the floor, and he freaked out. Because back at our house, he had heard me outside the front door, banging and asking him to let me in. When they told me in the morning, I felt 2 things at once. I was terrified, obviously, but part of me was relieved because now someone else had experienced it. It wasn't just me anymore. We had a friend from film school who was into occult history and old ritual texts. His girlfriend practiced witchcraft, and we trusted them enough to ask him to come over and check the house. The second he stepped into the basement, he walked straight to the spot where I kept seeing the figure. He stopped and said it felt freezing there and heavy, like the air itself had weight. He gave us sage and, very questionably, an Ouija board. He said if we wanted to communicate, we could try. We also asked him about the painting, but he said it didn't feel like anything special. Just old, weird, and creepy looking. We decided to use the board. I know, terrible idea. But at that point, I wanted answers. I wanted to know what this thing was. Maybe it wasn't trying to hurt us. Maybe it was lonely. Maybe, in some strange way, we could live with it. We sat in the basement, right where it had appeared. We lit a candle, went over the rules, and started asking questions. At first, it felt fake. The planchette went to 666, and we all thought someone was messing around. But then Len got really quiet. He thought whatever was coming through might be an old friend of his who had passed away. He started asking questions only she would know, and the answers were surprisingly accurate. Strangely enough, that board session was probably the calmest supernatural experience we ever had in that house. Afterward, we saged the place thoroughly and left to spend Thanksgiving with our families. When I came back, my girlfriend had given me a sleep mask because I'd been having so much trouble resting. Kira and her sister were supposed to be home, and I had work later, so I lay down for a nap. Then, I heard them talking. Kira's sister said, "Right there?" And Kira answered, "Yes, stand there." I opened my eyes, pulled off the sleep mask, and nobody was in the room. I called Kira. She was across the state, driving her sister home. I was alone in the house. That night, after work, I came home still shaken. My coworkers had told me that if it was a ghost, I shouldn't provoke it. Don't acknowledge it too much, and if I had to, be kind. But I didn't even make it to sleep. I looked toward the stairs and saw a hand curl slowly around the banister. The basement stairs had a landing where one set went toward the back door and the other turned down into the basement. The hand came from that landing first, then fingers wrapped around the rail. Then, a face leaned into view. It was greenish, veiny, and wrong. Not like a person. Not like the shapes I'd seen before pretending to be people I knew. That was it for me. I ran toward the stairs and yelled at it to leave. I put salt on the stairs and around my bed. I was scared, but I was also furious. There's a point where fear turns into, absolutely not. After that, I called Colin. He had recently told me his mother practiced witchcraft, and she gave us a spell to recite to clear the house. We opened every window and door. Colin walked through with sage, repeating the words. When we opened the attic door and he stepped inside, the sage went out instantly. There was no draft. He came down, relit it, and I went up with him to see what was going on. That's when we noticed two mirrors facing each other. I know people argue about this kind of thing, but some believe facing mirrors can act like a doorway. We turned them away from each other and kept going. Then we heard a loud bang from the basement, followed by smaller bangs. Like one of the basement windows had flown open, slammed into the ceiling, dropped back down, and bounced. We ran downstairs. The window was closed. Then we went near the painting, which was still downstairs, and the sage smoke started pushing away from it in thick waves, like something was forcing it back. I grabbed the painting, carried it outside, and left it there. After that, I moved back upstairs. Not long after, Len moved out too. We tried reaching out to several paranormal investigators, but nobody wanted to come check the house. Our landlord once made this strange, offhand comment about someone maybe dying there, or being taken from the house to the hospital and dying later. He never really explained it. I still don't know what we dealt with. Maybe it was tied to the house. Maybe the painting stirred something up. Maybe it was already there and just got stronger once I moved into the basement. But whatever it was, it learned voices. It learned faces. It knew how to imitate the people around us. And that, honestly, is the part that still bothers me most. When I was 18, my family packed up and moved about 2.5 hours away to this small Texas town, all because my aunt had married a man who ran a dairy farm. And when I say my family moved, I mean everybody came along. My grandparents, my dad, his sisters, their husbands, all the cousins. Me and my cousin had just finished high school, and instead of stepping into adulthood in the place we'd always known, we followed the whole family into a town where people didn't just know your name, they knew what truck you drove. My dad had always been a farmer, so he settled in pretty quickly. It didn't take long before he met a man named Rocco. Rocco was older than my dad by maybe 20 years, but somehow that never mattered. They just clicked. He was one of those men who looked like he had been shaped by the land itself. Faded overalls, worn-out cap, heavy boots, sun-browned hands. He helped around the dairy, and later, when the dairy didn't make it, he and my dad went into business together. They bought some land, raised cattle, and opened a small wild game processing shop. For years, they worked beside each other almost every single day. If you saw my dad, Rocco was usually somewhere nearby. That was just the rhythm of things. Then, in 2021, Rocco passed away. He'd been sick, but we honestly thought he was improving. My stepmom worked as an EMT, and she would go over to his house every week to set up his medicine for him. One day, while she was there, she heard him fall in the bathroom. She ran in, called for help on her radio, and started CPR right away. But he'd had a heart attack. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. Just like that. My dad was crushed. Rocco wasn't just his friend. He wasn't just his business partner. He was family in every way that mattered. Because it was 2021, we didn't even know at first what kind of funeral there would be. But Rocco had lived in that little Texas town all his life. He'd been a hometown football hero when he was young, and he was the kind of man everybody had a story about. So the church was full, and I remember seeing my dad cry. That's one of the memories that still stays sharp for me. My dad crying for Rocco. After that, things became hard in another way. My dad was grieving, but he also had to deal with Rocco's relatives over the land, the cattle, and everything they had built together. It was messy and painful, and there was no way to separate the business side from the heartbreak. Then, maybe 6 or 8 weeks after Rocco died, I had a dream. But it didn't feel like a normal dream. It didn't feel scrambled or strange. It felt different. I saw Rocco, and I knew it was him right away. But he didn't look the way I remembered him. He looked young, maybe 30 or 40 years younger. His hair was blonde, and he wasn't wearing his old cap. He had on a clean blue button-up shirt, actually buttoned all the way, and a pair of jeans without a single rip in them. He was standing in wheat that came up around his knees, and the wind was moving through it. He was leaning against a wooden fence post, beside a wire fence, and somehow I knew he had been fixing it. Nothing looked broken. Nobody told me. I just knew. I couldn't see myself in the dream. It was more like I was being allowed to watch for a moment. Then Rocco looked right at me. He never said a word, but I understood him completely. He was okay. He had made it. He was home. I woke up crying, but not because I was afraid. I cried because I wasn't ready for it to be over. I wanted to close my eyes and go right back there, just to see him one more time. And somehow, I also knew I shouldn't tell my dad yet. He wasn't ready. His grief was still too fresh, and everything with Rocco's family was still happening. So I kept it to myself. About a year later, I was out at my dad's place, and somehow Rocco came up in conversation. I don't remember exactly what led us there. I just remember feeling, very clearly, that it was time. So I told him. I told him about the wheat, about the fence post, about how young and peaceful Rocco looked. I told him how certain I felt that Rocco was letting me know he was all right. Then I asked my dad if he'd ever had a dream like that about him. He said no. And I told him what I had believed from the beginning. Maybe Rocco came to me because my dad wasn't ready to receive it yet. Maybe he knew I would carry that message quietly until the moment my dad could actually hear it. I'm not someone who goes looking for things like that. I don't chase paranormal stories, and honestly, I don't need more experiences like it. But I believe, with my whole heart, that what happened was real. I believe God let me see Rocco one time, just long enough to bring that peace back to my dad. Hey, I want to share something a bit personal and really unusual that's been happening to me for quite some time now. Actually, for about 4 years. I keep having these recurring dreams about this mysterious man. He always looks the same, and there's this consistent feeling every time I see him in my dream. But here's the thing. I've never met this person in real life. Not once. And it's not just any dream, you know? These dreams feel deeper, more vivid than any other dreams I've had before. So, a little about me. I'm a young adult, kind of introverted, and honestly, I've never really been involved romantically with anyone. Never had a relationship, never really been interested in that stuff much. But these dreams, they're different. They bring something else entirely. The dream I had recently was set in this enchanted forest, surrounded by towering ancient trees. The kind where the sunlight filters through the leaves in golden shafts, and everything feels alive but peaceful. We were completely away from the hustle of everyday life, somewhere no one could find us. The colors in this dream were unbelievably crisp, clear, and vivid, like someone had painted the world with the brightest, most enchanting palette. I found myself inside this modest medieval cottage, and it was so cozy and warm. Imagine warm amber tones everywhere, a bright fireplace crackling with cheerful flames, a comfy old couch that seems like it's hugged by time itself, and a wooden table piled high with books. The walls were made of stone and wood, and torches flickered softly, casting dancing shadows that made the room feel alive and safe. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect, a sanctuary. I was standing right there in the middle of the room, wearing a simple medieval dress, just taking it all in. The warmth, the peacefulness, the feeling of home. Then, Through a white-painted wooden door, he walked in. I recognized him immediately, as always, the mysterious man. He closed the door gently behind him. It felt so natural, like this was a place we shared. The funny part was, the moment I saw him, I just knew we were together. Like we were a couple living here, sharing this quiet life. I imagined he'd been outside, tending to the garden, working under the summer sun, getting his hands dirty in the soil. It was a routine for him, I could tell. He caught my gaze, and the way he looked at me was just breathtaking. Every time I see him in my dreams, he looks directly into my eyes, like he's seeing straight into my soul. And it's not just a glance. It's the way someone in love looks at the person they love. His smile lit up his whole face, the kind where his eyes crinkle at the edges because he's genuinely happy to be there. He was tall and steady, standing with ease but strength. His long, jet-black hair fell just past his shoulders, a little tousled from working outside. He wore black gardening gloves, practical but somehow elegant, and those classic Victorian black Wellington boots to keep the mud out. When he came closer, I got a better look at his eyes, those stunning, deep green eyes that always catch me off guard. Sometimes his hair is shorter in other dreams, but the eyes, they never change. They're mesmerizing. Usually he doesn't speak in these dreams. He just stays close, smiling softly, sitting or standing nearby. There's this peaceful, loving energy that surrounds him, and honestly, it's one of the most comforting feelings I've ever had. Like being wrapped in warmth and calm all at once. But this time, he did communicate with me, though not with words. It was like he spoke directly into my mind, telepathically. And for about a minute, he kept repeating, "I am a vampire," over and over. Now, you might think that would be scary, right? But I wasn't afraid at all. Because in that moment, he wasn't a monster to me. He was someone I loved deeply and who loved me back. It was a connection so strong that words weren't necessary. We just knew each other's hearts. I've never experienced anything like that in real life. Then, something strange happened. His eyes changed. They shifted from that familiar green to this incredible mix of colors. Bright orange at the center, glowing warmly, surrounded by a yellow rim on the outside, and then a thin line of red tracing the inner edge. It was mesmerizing and a little otherworldly. I found myself whispering, "I've never seen eyes like yours before." Just staring, utterly captivated. He smiled that same warm smile, and I wrapped my arms around him in a big hug, pressing a quick, tender kiss to his cheek. And then, I woke up. So, yeah, that's the story. Basically, I was in this beautiful, happy, committed relationship with a vampire, at least in my dreams. I'm not sure what it all means, but I thought it was pretty cool, and I wanted to share it with someone. Thanks for listening. Hey, I want to share something really personal and kind of unsettling that's been happening since my partner and I moved back into my old family home. You know, the place where I grew up. My parents had to move into long-term care recently, so we decided to come back and take care of the house. It should have been a comforting thing, but it's been, well, strange, to say the least. Growing up, I never really experienced anything weird here, but my mom always told me about this dark shadow figure she saw hovering over her bed at night. For years, she said it was there, just lingering silently. It terrified her so much that she started drinking every night just to fall asleep. She was in her late 60s then, and it went on for almost a decade until she had to move out this year. I always thought maybe it was dementia or something else messing with her mind. She was diagnosed around that time. But now, after all we've experienced, I'm not so sure. Back when my parents separated, about 8 years ago, my partner and I stayed in the house with my mom for a few weeks while she went to visit family. That's when the first weird stuff happened. I was alone in the basement one day, and I swear, the doorknob started resisting me, like something invisible was holding it shut. It's odd because the basement door doesn't even lock. It was like someone or something didn't want me to leave. At the same time, my partner was watering the garden. He was standing right next to the hose faucet in our fenced yard, and suddenly, the water just shut off on its own. No one else was around. He checked the tap, but it was fine, except for that moment when it just stopped while he was holding the hose. We looked at each other, both shaken but not quite ready to admit what was happening. Fast forward to July 2022. My partner and I moved back into the house. The place is a fixer-upper. We've barely touched the inside. Most of our time is outside in the backyard, which is lovely but has one annoying problem: no electrical outlets. So we string up extension cords and use flashlights when it gets dark. That's when things got really weird. Almost every day, one or more flashlights would turn on by themselves. And I mean completely turned on, bright as day in the middle of the afternoon, with no one touching them. We went through batteries like crazy. At first, we argued a lot because neither of us would admit leaving them on, but we're both pretty careful. My parents left behind tons of flashlights, every size and style imaginable, so I figured it wasn't just a faulty batch or something. Then I started testing it. I'd leave different flashlights in my line of sight when my partner was out. No visitors, no one else in the house. And sure enough, some would flicker on 4 or 5 times in one afternoon. Sometimes the same flashlight, sometimes different ones. It even happened with the safety flashlight in our car while it was parked in the driveway. Until recently, it was just happening to me during the day. But now that I'm back at work and my partner is home alone more, he's noticed it too. Flashlights turning on in the garage, untouched on shelves. It's like the house itself is alive, or something else is trying to get our attention. There are other things too. Sometimes we'll walk into a room and the water taps are running full blast, cold or hot, or sometimes both, loud enough that you can't miss it, and definitely not accidental. It's eerie because neither of us would leave the water on like that. And then there's the shadow. I keep seeing this dark figure out of the corner of my eye, just standing in the corner of a room. But whenever I turn to look directly, nothing's there. It's like a presence, always lurking just beyond my vision. Strangely, the shadow never shows itself when my cat or dog is nearby, so they might sense it too. This whole experience has been unsettling, but it's not the first time something like this touched my life, and I want to share another moment, one that changed me deeply. 3 days after my mom passed away, she had been battling sepsis, pneumonia, and brain cancer. I was exhausted and struggling to sleep. You know that fuzzy, in-between state when you're almost asleep but not quite? I felt myself slipping into that, but this time it was different. I felt completely present, as if time had stopped, and I was caught in this quiet moment between wakefulness and sleep. Then I sensed her, my mom's presence. It was so clear and familiar, like she was right there with me, even though she'd just passed. The feeling I remember most was urgency. She didn't have much time to talk, but she knew I needed her, and I could only ask yes or no questions. We communicated like this. Are you mad at me for how things turned out? No. Could I have done anything differently to help save you? No. Is everything going to be okay? Yes. Then I realized I was running out of time, but I wanted to ask something more. About my older sister. I felt rushed, like I had just seconds to say goodbye. I think I broke some unspoken rule about that state because suddenly I woke up. After that, I felt a little more at peace. I ate for the first time since Mom passed and slept better that night. Since then, I've tried to reconnect with that space, to reach her again, but it's been almost 2 years with no luck. Now, let me take you back even further, to when I was about 7 years old. We had guests over, so my 2 brothers and I were all sharing one big bedroom. There were 2 beds and a fold-out cot packed in there. One night, in the middle of sleep, my brother woke me up, his voice trembling. He whispered, "Something's not right," and told me to look around. The room was bathed in moonlight, and as my eyes adjusted, I realized all the furniture had been moved around, including my bed. And this wasn't a light bed. It was heavy, old, and I'm a light sleeper. I was amazed and confused, trying to figure out how my brothers, only 8 and 10, could have moved everything without waking me up. I looked over and saw my other brother sleeping peacefully in his bed, which was now on the opposite side of the room. Dressers were pulled from the walls and scattered around the center of the room. Nothing was where it had been before. It made no sense. We debated waking up our other brother, but my brother said he'd freak out, so we stayed quiet. Then I thought, let's turn on the light. But the switch was gone, completely vanished. The walls where the switches should have been were just blank. The only light was the moon and a street lamp outside, casting eerie shadows. Panic grew because when we looked for the door to leave, it too had disappeared. No door, no closets, just walls where they should have been. We were trapped, and fear settled deep inside us. I remember feeling that moment stretch out, the silence broken only by our quick breaths and the faint rustle of the night outside. I can't explain what happened, but it was like the room itself had shifted, or maybe something else was controlling it. Looking back, it's hard to believe, but it left an imprint on me. That feeling of being trapped, unseen forces moving the world around us. All these experiences, the shadow figures, the flashlights turning on, the water taps, the dream visit from my mom, and the childhood night in the rearranged room. They weave together into this tapestry of mystery and fear and love. It's like the house holds memories and energies we don't understand yet. I don't have all the answers, but sharing these stories feels like a step toward making sense of it all. Maybe it's a call for attention, a reminder of what's past, or just the house trying to tell us something. Either way, it's made me realize that sometimes the places we think are safe and familiar hold secrets waiting to be uncovered. You know, sometimes life throws moments at us that are so strange, so terrifying. They stay with us forever. I want to tell you about one such experience, something that happened to a young mother named Melina. It was a quiet afternoon when Melina noticed something unusual about her infant daughter, Lily. Suddenly, Lily started behaving oddly. She refused to feed and kept crying out in this piercing, high-pitched wail that cut through the silence of their home. The sound was so intense, it made Melina's heart race with worry. What was even more unsettling was the way Lily stared. Her wide eyes were fixed on an empty corner of the room, and her little face twisted in sheer terror, as if she was seeing something no one else could. Melina tried everything, rocking her, singing softly, offering a bottle. But nothing soothed Lily's cries. They went on relentlessly until Melina finally stepped outside, carrying her baby, hoping the fresh air might calm her down. Confused and deeply concerned, Melina called her doctor, desperate for answers. The doctor suggested she bring Lily to the hospital for a thorough checkup, to find out if there was a physical reason behind the incessant crying and fear. So, Melina did just that. She bundled Lily up and headed to the hospital. But even there, the situation didn't improve. Lily cried throughout the day, her screams echoing down the sterile hospital halls. It was exhausting and heart-wrenching. Then, as night fell and they returned home, a strange calm finally settled. Lily, exhausted from the day's ordeal, fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. Melina sat alone in the dimly lit room, the quiet almost heavy around her. The atmosphere shifted subtly, the shadows lengthening, wrapping around the corners of the room like a creeping fog. She felt it, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. Heart-pounding, she scanned the room, but it was just her and Lily, peacefully sleeping in her arms. As Melina got up to settle back into bed, she passed by the closet. Then she heard it, a sharp, deliberate knock on the closet door. It was a single tap at first, but then it repeated, growing louder and more insistent. Her breath caught in her throat. She froze, every muscle tense. Summoning every ounce of courage, she reached out and slowly opened the closet door, closing her eyes tightly as she peered inside. But there was nothing, just empty shelves and a few forgotten boxes. She laughed softly to herself, the nervous tension dissolving into relief. Maybe she was just imagining things, her mind playing tricks on her in the quiet of the night. But then, the knocking started again. Louder this time, more aggressive, pounding against the door with a desperate urgency. Melina tried to ignore it, desperate for sleep, but the sound grew unbearable. Suddenly, with a violent crash, the closet door burst open. In the pale moonlight filtering through the window, Melina saw a shadow emerge, a vague, dark shape of a woman in a flowing gown. The figure glided slowly out of the closet, its presence chilling the room. Then, as mysteriously as it appeared, the closet door slammed shut behind it, and the shadow vanished into thin air. Terrified, Melina bolted from her bed, desperate to get help from her parents. But the bedroom door wouldn't budge no matter how hard she pushed or pulled. Panic welled up inside her as tears streamed down her face. She flicked on the light and grabbed a rosary from her nightstand, clutching it tightly like a lifeline. Sitting back down with Lily cradled close, she stared at the closet, her heart hammering in her chest. The clock struck 1 a.m., each tick echoing like a drumbeat in the silence. Then, from somewhere behind her bed, she heard the knocking again, this time at the window. Whirling around, she saw nothing but the empty darkness outside. Slowly turning back, her breath caught in her throat. Standing right beside her was the shadow, its face featureless, its gaze fixed on Lily. Melina lifted the rosary, pointing it at the figure, but it didn't move, didn't flinch. Then, a whisper brushed past her ear, cold and soft. "Thanks for bringing your baby to me." The shadow's hands hovered over Lily's tiny neck. Suddenly, the baby began to cry again, her wails piercing and frantic. Then, horrifyingly, the cries faded, Lily's mouth frothing as the color drained from her face. Melina scrambled for her phone, tailing the doctor frantically, but the call wouldn't connect. She held her baby, tears streaming down her cheeks, watching helplessly as Lily's heartbeat slowed, fading away into silence. That night, Melina faced a nightmare no mother should ever know: the loss of her child, right there in the darkened room. And after taking Lily's life, the shadow disappeared, never to be seen again. Melina's story is a chilling reminder that sometimes there are things beyond our understanding lurking just out of sight, waiting for their moment. And for her, that moment came in the form of a shadow from the closet, forever changing her life. Hey there, let me tell you about a chilling story that unfolded in a quiet house during the mid-'80s. A story about two sisters, Annie and Jessie Andrews, and the strange, terrifying events that followed after they tried to reach out to their late mother. It's a tale that mixes grief, fear, and the unknown in such a way that it'll send a shiver down your spine. So, picture this. It's 1986, and Annie and Jesse had just lost their mother to cancer. It was sudden, and the grief hit them hard. Their dad, Brian, suddenly had to work longer hours to keep the household running, which meant the girls were often left alone in the house, the silence almost deafening without their mom's presence. The house felt emptier, colder somehow, and they missed her terribly. One quiet night, with the weight of loneliness pressing down on them, the sisters decided to try something unusual. They'd heard about Ouija boards, those mysterious boards said to help you talk to spirits. With a mix of hope and a little bit of nervous excitement, they went down to the basement, their footsteps echoing softly against the cold concrete walls, to see if they could connect with their mother's spirit. Now, they didn't really know how to use the board properly, just bits and pieces from what they'd heard or read. As they placed their fingers lightly on the planchette, the air around them seemed to grow heavier, the basement lights flickering faintly. Although the board didn't exactly spell out messages from their mother, they felt a strange closeness, a comforting presence that made their aching hearts feel a bit lighter. After their attempt, they put the board away and went back upstairs to their rooms, hoping for a peaceful night's sleep. But as the night deepened, with shadows dancing in the corners and the wind whispering outside, Jessie noticed a soft tapping sound coming from the walls of her room. At first, she thought maybe it was her imagination, but the tapping persisted, soft yet unmistakable. Curious and a bit unsettled, she crossed the hall to Annie's room to see if she could hear it too. To their surprise, Annie heard it as well. The tapping was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the hollow walls. In their fragile state, grieving and scared, the girls clung to the hope that this was their mother's spirit trying to reach out to them. They whispered questions into the darkness, hoping for answers, but the tapping never changed in response. Instead, it just lingered, a haunting lullaby in the stillness. When their dad, Brian, finally came home, the tapping had stopped. The girls told him about the strange noises with a mix of fear and relief, hoping he'd understand. But Brian's reaction was different. He was skeptical, torn between worrying about his daughter's fragile mental state and wanting to believe them. He thought maybe they were imagining things, caught up in their grief, and suggested therapy to help them cope. He reassured them that their mother's spirit was watching over them and urged them to get some sleep. But the tapping didn't stop. In fact, it grew louder and more persistent over the following days. Their nights became restless. Sleep became a stranger. And then came the unsettling discovery. Every time they left the house, locking the doors behind them, they'd return to find things moved around. Small objects shifted, drawers left open, furniture slightly out of place. Brian blamed the girls, accusing them of making trouble, but they insisted they hadn't done a thing. He warned them to stop causing trouble, or he'd have to involve a grief counselor. The mistrust was painful. The girls felt isolated, scared, and misunderstood. As days passed, the disturbances escalated. They began to feel the presence of something dark, something not their mother. It wasn't just a ghostly visitor, it was something malevolent, an evil entity that had latched onto them after their Ouija board session. Then came a cold January evening in 1987. The sisters were sitting quietly in the front room when the tapping started again. But this time, it seemed to come from the basement. Their hearts pounding, they knew they had to face it. Armed with a kitchen knife, they descended the creaky stairs, shadows stretching long and eerie under the dim light. The air was thick, each breath heavy and tense. But the basement was empty, except for a chilling note scrawled in red ink. "Come find me. I'm on your closet." Fear gripped them like ice. They fled the house and ran to their neighbors, breathless and trembling, explaining what had happened. Their dad's reaction when he came home was anything but comforting. Exhausted from work, he was angry and dismissive, accusing them of fabricating stories to stir up trouble. It was a breaking point, and he finally agreed to send them to a grief counselor. For a while, the strange events stopped. But peace was fleeting. One night, alone again, the tapping returned, this time from Annie's bedroom. With dread tightening their chests, they entered to find another message written on the wall. "I am back. Find me if you can." Terrified, the girls ran once more to their neighbor's house, staying there until Brian came back. When he arrived, his anger boiled over, but something in the disarray inside the house made him pause. Rooms were tossed, belongings scattered as if a storm had passed through. Then, on the wall, another message. "Marry me." And then, the unimaginable. Brian saw a young boy standing inside the closet, dressed in his late wife's clothes and holding a hatchet. The boy's eyes met his, and in an instant, he vanished, like a ghost slipping through the cracks of reality. Shaken and terrified, Brian fled to his neighbors and called the police. The officers searched every inch of the house but found no clues. The family was told to stay elsewhere while the investigation continued. For 2 weeks, they stayed with relatives, haunted by the question, how could that boy disappear so suddenly? And the guilt gnawed at Brian for doubting his daughters. Eventually, the crowded relatives' house pushed them back home. As they approached, Brian saw a light flicker in the second-floor balcony window, and there, standing silently, was the boy, watching them. Brian called the police again in a panic. This time, the officers found pennies glued all over the walls and floors, a strange, obsessive detail. Then, behind the dryer in the basement, they discovered a hidden crawl space, a narrow maze weaving through the walls of the entire house. Inside, they found the boy, Daniel LaPlante, a disturbed teenager who'd been stalking Annie. Daniel had been living in the walls for 2 months after breaking up with Annie, spying on the family through tiny peepholes he'd cut. He used the Ouija board session to craft a spooky narrative, terrifying the girls and manipulating their grief for his twisted purposes. It's a story that reminds us how fear can sometimes be born not from the supernatural, but from the dark corners of human obsession. Annie and Jesse's ordeal was real, terrifying, and heartbreaking, but it also showed the strength of a family facing the unknown together. Hey, I want to share with you a story that's been on my mind. A real chilling tale about a young girl named Skylar Neese and the mystery surrounding her disappearance. It's one of those stories where every detail just seems to weigh heavier the more you think about it. It all began on a summer night, July 5th, 2012. Skylar was just 16 years old. She had just finished a night shift working at a local fast food spot, Wendy's. Imagine her coming home, tired, the kind of tired that makes you want to collapse and just stay still. She walked into her family's apartment, exhausted, but still took a moment to hug her parents and tell them she loved them. Such a small gesture, but it was so full of warmth. They watched her walk down the hallway on the first floor, enter her room, and close the door, just like she always did. The next morning, her parents, Mary and Dave, woke up early to get ready for work. They noticed her door was still shut. They thought, she must be sleeping, and decided not to disturb her. So they went about their day, quietly leaving without saying goodbye or checking in, hoping she was getting some much-needed rest. But as the morning turned to noon, Dave came back home early from work. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. He noticed the door to Skylar's room was still closed. He knocked, gently at first, calling her name, but there was no answer. His heart started to pound. Something felt off. When he didn't get a response, he broke into her room, and the sight that met his eyes was empty. Her bed was untouched, no sign she had been there recently. Dave's mind raced. Skylar was the kind of daughter who always shared her plans, so he tried to remember if she'd told him about leaving or going somewhere. Nothing came to mind. He tried calling her cell phone, but there was no answer. Panic rising, he called Mary, who suggested checking with Skylar's friends, thinking she might be with them. In a frenzy, Dave called Sheila, one of Skylar's closest friends. Sheila told him Skylar wasn't with her and that they had talked the previous night. Everything seemed normal then. Dave begged Sheila to reach out if she heard anything, hanging up with a knot tightening in his stomach. Then, something strange caught Dave's eye in Skylar's room. The mesh screen on the window was missing, and the window itself was not fully closed. There was a gap just big enough for a finger to slip through. He found the missing mesh hidden inside Skylar's closet. Nearby, a bench was positioned just right beneath the window. It hit him. Skylar might have been sneaking out. But here's the thing. If she had snuck out and come back, she would surely have put the mesh screen back and moved the bench to avoid suspicion. The fact that these were out of place told Dave one brutal truth. Skylar hadn't returned that night. Mary arrived home soon after, and together they waited, hoping she might come back in the next few hours. But when a call came from Wendy's asking why Skylar hadn't shown up for her shift, all hope turned to fear. Dave dialed 911, reporting his daughter missing. Later that evening, Sheila called Mary, checking if Skylar had returned. Mary told her no, and that the police were involved now. Sheila's tone changed. She admitted she had seen Skylar the night before. She revealed something the parents didn't know. The trio of Skylar, Sheila, and another girl named Rachel had been sneaking out at night to smoke weed together. They'd park a couple of blocks away from their homes to avoid waking their parents. That night, Sheila had dropped Skylar off 2 blocks from her apartment. This terrified Mary and Dave. They feared their daughter might have been abducted. Together with Sheila's parents, they scoured the neighborhood, knocking on doors, searching every corner in desperation. But there was nothing. Then Mary remembered. A security camera faced the street near their apartment. They rushed back and begged to see the footage. Sheila claimed she dropped Skylar off at midnight, but the video told a different story. It showed Skylar running down the street at 12:30 a.m., heading toward a car and getting into the back seat willingly. The car was too far away to make out details, but this meant she wasn't kidnapped. She got in on her own. The police told the parents that teens running away was sadly common, reassuring them Skylar would probably come back when she felt ready. But months passed. 6 long months. In December, Rachel, the other friend, had a severe mental breakdown. She became violent, breaking things, lashing out at her family. Her mom called the police and Rachel was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. As soon as she was discharged, the police took her in for questioning. And then, the chilling confession came. Rachel told the police what happened that night. Skylar had come home from work, tired but awake, scrolling through her phone. Messages from Sheila and Rachel popped up, asking her to sneak out and join them to smoke. Skylar had initially refused. Her other friends said Sheila and Rachel were drifting away from Skylar, and the trio was breaking into a duo. It hurt Skylar deeply, and she started avoiding them. But that night, she gave in. Sheila picked her up in her car right outside her apartment, the same car from the security footage. They drove about 45 minutes out of town to a deserted spot they had visited before. The girls got out and sat down, Skylar closest to the car. As Sheila tried to light the joint, she realized she'd left the lighter inside the car. She asked Skylar to grab it. As Skylar walked toward the car, she suddenly heard Sheila and Rachel counting down. 1, 2, 3. Before she could react, 2 knives plunged into her back. Skylar tried to run, but Sheila tackled her, and Rachel helped pin her down. They stabbed her repeatedly in the chest and neck, all while she pleaded, Why are you doing this to me?" Rachel stopped after some wounds, but Sheila kept stabbing until Skylar's neck stopped making those gurgling sounds. Then, the girls grabbed shovels and bleach from the car. They cleaned the knives and themselves, trying to dig a grave. The ground was too hard, so they abandoned the effort, threw Skylar's body on a nearby log, and covered it with rocks and sticks, leaving no trace behind. Investigations later revealed Sheila and Rachel had planned this for a month, executing their plan with a terrifying coldness. And the reason? They didn't like Skylar anymore. It's horrifying to think that such a senseless act could happen for such a shallow reason. When the police found Skylar's remains, Sheila had the audacity to tweet, "We really did go on 3. It's a haunting story, one that reminds us how fragile life can be, how dark the shadows of friendship can turn, and how vital it is to keep our loved ones close. I hope Skylar's story stays with you, a somber echo of a life stolen too soon." I've gone back and forth about telling this story because I know how it's going to sound. I really do. But I've been around here long enough to know that some of you might understand why I can't just brush it off anymore. I live in a little town in West Virginia called Gray Hollow. It's the kind of place where everyone knows which truck belongs to which house. And after dark, there's not much moving except wind, animals, and whatever your mind decides to invent. My place is out near the edge of town, at the very end of a dead-end road. Behind the house, there's nothing but woods. Thick woods. The kind that feel bigger at night than they do during the day. Past my driveway, there aren't any streetlights, so when it gets dark all the way. This started in late January. The first time something happened, it was January 29th, 2026, at 3:19 in the morning. I remember the time because I woke up suddenly and checked my phone, thinking maybe a message had come through. I'm a light sleeper sometimes, especially if my phone buzzes. Then I heard gravel shifting outside. At first, I told myself it was probably a deer, or maybe somebody had turned around at the end of the road, even though that almost never happens at that hour. I got up and looked through my bedroom window. There was someone standing by my mailbox. At least, I thought it was someone. It was tall. Too tall, honestly. Taller than anyone I've ever seen around here. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, facing the house. No flashlight. No car. No engine sound. Nothing. I watched it for a few seconds, and then this feeling came over me. Not fear exactly, not at first. More like my whole body quietly telling me, "Stop looking." So I closed the curtain. I tried to tell myself I was half asleep. I've had my own struggles with anxiety and mental health, so I leaned on that explanation pretty hard. I wanted it to be my mind playing tricks on me. The next morning, I went outside. There had been a thin layer of snow overnight, but there were no footprints near the mailbox. None. The mailbox door was open, though. I didn't remember leaving it that way. I tried to forget about it. I really did. I told myself it was nothing, because sometimes nothing is the only answer that lets you get through the day. Then it happened again, on February 3rd. Same time. 3:19 a.m. This time, I woke up already knowing something was wrong. I hadn't heard anything yet. I just felt it. I checked my phone, and when I saw the time, my stomach dropped. I made myself look out the window. It was closer. Not by the mailbox anymore. It was halfway up the driveway. Still tall, still completely still, but there was something wrong with the shape of it. I don't know how else to explain that. It looked too thin, too straight, like the proportions didn't belong to a person. I whispered, "What are you?" And right after I said that, it tilted its head. slowly, way too far to one side. I stepped back from the window and didn't look again for the rest of the night. After that, I started waking up around that time on purpose. Or maybe my body started doing it for me. Most nights, nothing happened, and I almost convinced myself again that it was stress, lack of sleep, my brain making shadows into monsters. Then February 12th happened. I woke up to tapping. At first, I thought it was my bedroom window. There are branches close to that side of the house, and it had been windy, so that made sense. But the sound wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from the living room. I checked my phone. 3:19 a.m. I still don't know why I went downstairs. I wish I hadn't, but something in me needed to know. The tapping stopped the second I reached the bottom step. The whole house went quiet. I stood there listening, barely breathing. Then I looked toward the front door. There's a little window near the top of it, and something outside was blocking the glass. Something was standing right up against the door. I walked closer, slowly. I got maybe 5 feet away. Then it moved. Not backward, not away from the house. It slid sideways past the window. I only saw part of it, but that was enough. It looked too tall to fit in the frame, like the window was only showing me a slice of something much bigger. I didn't open the door. There was no chance I was opening that door. I went back upstairs, locked myself in my room, and stayed there until morning. A few days later, on February 16th, I set up an old security camera I had in the garage. I pointed it at the driveway. Nothing special, just motion detection. The next morning, I checked the footage. At 3:19 a.m., the camera triggered. But there was nothing there. No person, no animal, just the empty driveway. Except the audio picked something up. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps on gravel, coming toward the camera. Then they stopped right in front of it. After that, there was this breathing sound. I don't even know if breathing is the right word. It was too steady, too hollow, like air moving through something that wasn't built for it. Then the video cut out for a few seconds. When it came back, everything looked normal again. I haven't seen it since that night. No tapping, no figure in the driveway, no mailbox left open. But I still wake up around 3:19 sometimes. And every time I do, I get this awful feeling that if I look outside again, it'll be closer than before. I don't know what it was, but I'm starting to think it noticed me noticing it. I've had 3 experiences like this, but I'm only going to talk about 2 of them here. The first time, I was about 13. I lived way out in the country, on a farm where everything felt far away from everything else. My home life wasn't easy, and that's how I ended up outside in the middle of winter, around midnight, searching for a missing socket wrench. I wasn't allowed back inside until I found it. By then, my stepdad had turned off the porch lights and most of the lights in the house, so I was out there in the dark. I remember walking along the pale gravel driveway, trying to stay on it because even in the cold, farm life has a way of hiding things that can bite or sting you. I was looking down at the gravel when I noticed it seemed to have this faint glow. Not bright exactly, but lit enough that I could see the path stretching way out past the pasture. Then I looked up. The moon looked huge, and the longer I stared at it, the bigger it seemed to get. Bigger and bigger, until it felt like it was taking up too much of the sky. I had on a puffy winter coat, but honestly, I was still underdressed for how cold it was. At first, I remember feeling the chill. Then, after a while, I didn't feel cold anymore. I didn't feel much of anything. I just went still. Numb, quiet. I stood there staring at the moon, and to me, it felt like maybe 20 minutes had passed. Eventually, I sort of snapped out of it, lost focus, and decided to sneak back into the house. The kitchen clock was one of the only things glowing inside. When I checked it, I realized I had been outside for over 3 hours. The next time something like this happened, I was 22 and on a cruise. It was December, so the weather wasn't great, but that was part of why the trip was cheap. A big storm rolled in, and the crew started making announcements that they were going to close the outside decks. I'd had one drink with dinner, so I might have been a little tipsy, but nothing more than that. For some reason, I got this idea that I wanted to go outside and see the storm before they shut everything down. I found a door that was still unlocked and ended up in this outdoor walkway area. I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to be there. It looked like one of those access areas that led to other parts of the ship, but I was able to get close to the front, which was what I wanted. I was still high above the water, and I could see a smaller deck below me near the bow. The wind was wild. The ship was rocking and jerking, and the rain was coming in sideways, but it wasn't pouring yet. I remember looking out into the dark ocean, and then my eyes lifted to the moon. That same feeling came over me. It was almost euphoric, but not in a normal way. It was peaceful and overwhelming at the same time. Everything around me started to fade. The lights from the ship, the noise, the storm, even the feeling of where I was standing. And I should say, I was wearing heels and a formal dress because I had just come from dinner. I should have been freezing. I should have been uncomfortable. But I wasn't. I just stood there in the storm, staring up, feeling like the whole world had gone quiet except for the moon. Eventually, one of my friends found me. I remember feeling disappointed when he did, almost like I had been pulled away from something. He was upset because, apparently, I had been missing for at least 30 minutes, maybe longer. That was just how long they knew of. And then I noticed the rain. It was suddenly pouring, not misting, not light rain, but a full downpour. To me, it felt like it had changed in just a few seconds. I've had that feeling one other time, but I still don't really know what happened or what it was. I don't know if it was something psychological, something spiritual, or just my mind reacting to stress and the moon in a strange way. I'm not trying to make it sound bigger than it is. I'm just looking for advice or guidance because I've never been able to fully explain it. Hey everyone, I wanted to share something that happened to me a few years ago because I still think about it, and honestly, I'd really like to know if anyone else has ever experienced anything even close to this. Before anyone says it was sleep paralysis, I completely understand why that would be the first thought. I've wondered that too, but the part that still makes me question it is that someone else in the room heard part of it as well. This happened back in 2019, when I was at my boyfriend's house. I'll call him Evan. His mom was at work, so it was just the two of us there. I had decided to take a nap, and I've never been the kind of person who sleeps through everything. I usually wake up pretty easily. At some point, I suddenly heard his porch screen door swing open really hard. It was loud, not just a little creak or a breeze catching it, but the kind of sound that makes your whole body tense up before your brain even catches up. It woke me up, but I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move either. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't turn over or say anything. His mom would never come in like that, so immediately I felt this wave of panic. I remember thinking, who just came inside? Then I heard the front door open just as hard. Right after that, a deep male voice called out, "Hello?" It sounded like someone checking to see if anyone was home. Evan didn't react at all. He was still asleep beside me. Meanwhile, I was trapped in my own body, trying so hard to move, trying to force my eyes open, trying to make any sound at all. Then I heard footsteps, more than one set from what I could tell. They moved quickly through the house, coming straight toward the bedroom. The bedroom door opened, and at that point, I truly thought we were being robbed. I was terrified, but I still couldn't do anything. Then something even stranger happened. Out of nowhere, I heard this intense drilling sound right next to my ear. It was loud and sharp, and my whole body felt like it was vibrating with it. It happened once, and I remember thinking, what is happening to me? Then it happened again. By that point, I started panicking in a different way. I thought, is this permanent? Am I going to be stuck like this? Then it happened a third time, and I genuinely had this horrible feeling that this was just going to be my life now. Frozen, aware, unable to speak, with that sound tearing through me. And then, just as suddenly, I heard the footsteps leaving. Everything went quiet. The moment it stopped, I could move again. I sat up immediately, completely shaken. Evan woke up too and asked me what was wrong. I told him everything, and he just stared at me for a second. His face changed, like he was trying to decide whether to say something or not. Then he told me that he thought he had heard the door open too. He also thought he heard a man say, "Hello?" But he said he had been half asleep and just drifted back off. He didn't experience the rest of what happened to me. Not the footsteps coming to the room, not the drilling sound, not the vibrating. But both of us heard someone come in and say hello. That's the part I can't really explain. I know sleep paralysis can feel incredibly real. I know it can come with sounds, fear, and the feeling that someone is in the room. But how did he hear part of it too? So I'm wondering if anyone has had anything similar happen, especially something where another person heard part of the same thing. I don't know if this was sleep paralysis, something paranormal, something stranger, or maybe something I don't even have a name for. And just to be clear, I wasn't under the influence of anything. I wasn't using drugs. I didn't have any mental health issues. And at that point in my life, I hadn't tried anything like that at all. I've also never experienced anything remotely similar since. I still don't know what happened, but I'd really love to hear what other people think. I was 6 years old when this happened. My family had just moved from the Philippines to a small place tucked away in the Appalachian Mountains. For the first few weeks, everything felt peaceful. Strange, yes, because it was so different from home, but peaceful. My parents had read about the area before we moved there. They knew people had stories about the mountains, and they took the local warnings seriously. Keep the doors locked. Cover the windows at night. Do not go outside after dark unless you absolutely have to. Things like that. So we were careful. But one night, while we were having dinner, we made one mistake. The curtains were still open. I remember sitting at the table, eating quietly, when something outside caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a pale tree trunk in the darkness. But then I looked closer. There was a figure standing only a few steps from our house. It was tall, thin, and completely white. Its mouth was hanging open so wide it looked unnatural. And the worst part was that it seemed to be looking straight at me. Not at the house. At me. I tried to tell my parents. I pointed at the window and said there was something outside, but they barely looked. They told me I was probably tired, or that I had seen a branch moving in the dark. But when I looked back, the figure was gone. Just gone. Like it had never been there at all. Later that night, my father locked the doors, checked the windows, and pulled thick, dark curtains over every piece of glass in the house. My mother and I went upstairs. She was folding clothes near the closet while I lay in bed, still thinking about what I had seen. Then I noticed something that made my stomach turn cold. There was a cross hanging on the wall near the closet, and it was upside down. I told my mother. She looked at it, and the moment she saw it, her face changed. She called for my father right away, but he did not answer. That was not like him. My father was not the kind of person to ignore us, especially at night in a place like that. After a few minutes, my mother went downstairs to check on him, and I was left alone in the room. I remember lying there, too scared to move, praying silently that nothing would happen to my parents. I was only 6, but I understood enough to know that something was wrong. Then I heard it. The window across from my bed started banging, not tapping, banging. The window was already shut tight, and the curtains were covering it, but something outside was hitting it again and again, like it was trying to force its way in. I screamed for my mother. She rushed back into the room just as the glass began to crack. She grabbed me and pulled me under the bed. My father came in right after her and hid beneath the heavy wooden table beside us. Then the window broke. I will never forget that sound. Glass fell across the floor, and then we heard footsteps inside the room. Slow footsteps. Careful footsteps. Like whatever had come in was searching for us. My mother held me so tightly I could barely breathe. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. We stayed hidden while that thing walked around the room above us. I could not see it, but I could feel it there. After what felt like forever, the footsteps stopped. Then we heard it leave. Even after it was gone, none of us moved right away. My father waited and listened for a long time, just to make sure it was not trying to trick us. When he finally said it was safe, he got up, grabbed a thick wooden plank, and blocked the broken window as best as he could. My mother was shaking. I was crying. My father tried to stay calm, but I could tell he was scared too. That night, my mother told me to try to sleep, but she and my father stayed awake guarding the house until morning. The next day, my mother made breakfast like she was trying to pretend things were normal. My father sat nearby doing research, trying to find more information about the mountains and what we might have seen. I barely spoke. Every time I looked at the window beside me, I saw that white figure in my mind again. We stayed there for 3 more months, but the feeling in that house never went away. Sometimes I thought I saw something pale moving between the trees. Sometimes I felt watched, even in the daytime. Eventually, my father decided we were going back to the Philippines. We had saved enough money, and after what happened, none of us wanted to stay. We never went back to that place. Even now, years later, I still think about that night. I do not have nightmares as often anymore, but when I do, it is always the same thing. That white figure outside the window, its mouth open, its eyes on me. So if anyone listening lives in the Appalachian Mountains, please be careful. Stay alert. And please, if your child tells you they saw something, especially if they look truly scared, listen to them. Sometimes children notice things adults try too hard to explain away. It was somewhere around 2 in the morning when 5 of us drove into Erie Colony. And you know, Erie feels like a completely different place at that hour. During the day, it is still part of the city somehow, but at night, it feels cut off from everything. The roads are quiet, the trees feel heavier, and there is this strange silence that makes even a small sound feel a little too loud. We eventually stopped near the gate of a building called Royal Imperial Heights. The car headlights were on, so the whole gate area was lit up pretty clearly. We were not hidden in darkness or guessing shapes from far away. Everything was right there in front of us. And that is when I saw him. There was a security guard standing just behind the gate. He was wearing a dark blue uniform. He was not in a corner, not half covered by a shadow, not far away. He was just standing there, facing our car. There were 2 dogs near him too. I remember pointing him out right away and saying something like, "Look, the guard is standing there." but everyone else in the car looked at me like I had said something strange. All four of them said, "What guard?" I thought they were joking at first, but they were serious. They could see the dogs. That part was clear to everyone. But they said there was no man in blue standing behind the gate. Instead, they kept telling me there was another guard, wearing a brown uniform, sitting inside a small cabin near the side. But I could not see anyone in that cabin at all. For me, the only guard there was the one in blue, right behind the gate, right in front of us. And for the next couple of minutes, we kept arguing. 5 people, sitting in the same car, looking at the same gate, with the same headlights shining on it. But somehow, we were not seeing the same thing. That is when the whole situation started feeling wrong. Not because area is quiet at night, not because the place looked spooky, but because I was seeing something so clearly, and nobody else could see it. So I drove away. We went maybe a kilometer ahead before stopping again, but the argument did not stop. Everyone was still trying to explain what they had seen, and I was still saying, "No, I'm telling you, there was a guard standing right there." After a while, they convinced me to turn back and check once more. So we went back. Same road, same gate, same place. I stopped the car again, and we all waited. And then, after a few seconds, the same guard in the blue uniform came and stood behind the gate. This time, everyone saw him. All 5 of us. He was just standing there casually, using his phone. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. Completely normal, completely real. But he was in the exact same spot where I had seen him earlier. And that is the part I still cannot fully explain. Maybe I noticed him before everyone else did. Maybe their attention was somewhere else. Maybe it was just one of those weird moments where the mind plays tricks. Or maybe, for those first 2 minutes, I saw something that the others simply could not see yet. I live in France, in an old stone house that's been completely restored now, though it definitely didn't always look the way it does today. The woman who owns it is in her early 70s, and this was actually her childhood home. She grew up here with her parents and her grandparents. After they passed away, she left the place empty for more than 2 decades. From what I've been told, it slowly fell apart during that time. Then, years later, she came back and decided to bring it back to life. And that's the house I live in now. To be honest, we've never had anything here that I would seriously call paranormal. Some corners of the house have that old house feeling, you know, the kind where the air feels a little heavier than it should. But nothing frightening has ever really happened. There was one former neighbor, though, who used to sneak inside back when the place was abandoned. His name was Mark, or at least that's what everyone called him. He said he heard footsteps, whispers, even voices inside the house. Sometimes he claimed he ran out terrified. I'll be honest, I never fully trusted his stories. We had a lot of trouble with him later on, and I think he was dealing with some serious personal issues. So I always took what he said with a mountain of salt. But then something happened that I still can't explain. One evening, I was upstairs in my bedroom. My room is right above the main hallway downstairs. Next to that hallway is the living room, where my parents usually sit in the evening to watch TV. If I drop something or walk too heavily in my room, they can hear it pretty clearly from down there. That night, everything was quiet. Then suddenly, I heard 3 loud knocks come from the floor beneath me. Not soft taps, not creaks. 3 heavy, identical bangs. Boom. 1 second. Boom. 1 second. Boom. I felt the floor tremble under my feet each time. At first, I thought maybe something had fallen downstairs, or maybe someone had bumped into a wall. It startled me, but I didn't think too much of it. Then, a few moments later, my parents messaged me from the living room. They asked, "What was that noise?" They said it sounded like it had come from the ceiling above them, which would mean it came from my bedroom floor. The sound had echoed through the whole house. That's when it stopped feeling ordinary, because from my side, it sounded like someone had been underneath me, knocking hard on the ceiling below. But from their side, it sounded like the noise came from where I was standing. I checked around my room. Nothing had fallen. Nothing was out of place. Nobody else was upstairs. I even asked a neighbor afterward if they had heard anything, but they hadn't heard a thing. The sound had come from inside the house, from the floor, from right under my feet. And to this day, I still don't know what made those 3 knocks. Most of my life, I've carried this around quietly. I've never really known how to explain it, and I've never met anyone who said, "Yes, I know exactly what you mean." But when I was little, I used to have these recurring dreams that didn't feel like dreams at all. They felt more like I was being taken somewhere. Every time I was inside this enormous old manor, or maybe it was a castle. It was hard to tell because everything was so huge and dark, like the whole place had been built for people twice our size. The ceilings went up forever. The furniture felt oversized. The hallways stretched on in a way that made you feel small before anything frightening even happened. And there were children everywhere. Not just a few, hundreds, maybe more. I remember them hiding in the same rooms as me, crouched under beds, pressed behind heavy curtains, tucked behind wardrobes and chairs. There were no adults anywhere, not one. We were all hiding from something. I never saw what it was. I don't think I ever had the courage to look. But every child there knew it was moving through the building. We could feel it coming before we heard it. And then, from somewhere down the hall or behind another door, the screaming would start. That was how we knew it had entered a nearby room. The second that happened, everyone scattered. Nobody had to explain the rules. Nobody had to tell us what to do. We all understood the same thing in that wordless, awful way children sometimes understand danger. Don't let it find you. The room I remember most was like a giant bedroom. It was dim and heavy feeling, full of shadows and old furniture. I can still picture kids crawling beneath the bed frame, hiding behind the drapes, holding their breath. It felt less like a dream scene and more like a place I had returned to again and again. Eventually, I would always run. I'd burst out into a huge spiral staircase with a deep red runner on the steps. It curled downward around this enormous empty space in the center. And somehow, instead of using the stairs, I would throw myself into that open drop. I remember falling through the middle of it, not exactly dying, not exactly waking up, just escaping. There's another part I've never forgotten. Sometimes hidden doors would appear in the walls, almost like the house was changing its mind. Once, I opened one and found a narrow staircase behind it, filled with smoke or pale mist. I climbed it, and near the top I came to a door with a keyhole. When I looked through, I saw the brightest light I've ever seen. It wasn't like sunlight. It wasn't like a lamp. It was something far beyond that, so bright it felt almost alive. I don't know how else to describe it. But the part that stayed with me most wasn't the castle, or the thing hunting us, or even the light. It was the other children. They didn't feel like dream people. They felt real, like actual children, like they had their own fear, their own thoughts, their own memories of that place. I'm not saying this was supernatural. I'm not trying to prove anything. I just want to know whether anyone else remembers something even close to this. A massive dark place. Only children. Everyone hiding. Something moving through the rooms. That shared, silent terror. And some kind of escape through falling, descending, or finding a hidden passage. If any of this sounds familiar to you, even a little, I'd honestly love to hear about it. People usually don't know what to do with this story when I tell it. Some smile politely, some think I'm joking, some assume I must have dreamed it, or imagined it later, or stitched it together from things I learned as a child. But for me, it has never felt like that. This is one of my earliest memories. Actually, it feels earlier than early. It feels like the first thing I ever knew. Before I remember having a body, before I remember a crib or a room or a voice calling my name, I remember being aware. There were no hands, no feet, no weight. I wasn't breathing, but I didn't need to. I was just there, conscious, calm, quiet. I don't know if I was floating. That's the closest word I have, but even that doesn't feel quite right. It was more like existing in a wide, open stillness. Not empty, not lonely, just peaceful, like everything was waiting with purpose. And then there was a voice. I couldn't see anyone. I didn't see a face or a figure. I only remember light, and I somehow knew the voice was beside me, even though there was no one there in the way we usually understand someone being there. The voice asked me which planet I wanted to live on. I know how strange that sounds. I know. But in that moment, I understood the question completely. I was shown several places, not in a slow, ordinary way, but all at once, as if a huge amount of meaning could fit inside a single, breathless instant. And then I saw it. A round blue world, far away. Earth. It was so blue, deep, bright, alive. It looked beautiful to me in a way I still don't know how to explain. I felt drawn to it immediately, like something in me leaned toward it before I even decided. So I chose Earth. After that, the voice asked me about the life I wanted to go through. Not exactly in spoken words. It was more like the meaning entered me directly, and I understood that I had to choose an experience, a path. Then I became aware of so many possibilities, glimpses, wishes, lives, situations. They passed through my awareness like little windows opening and closing. One of them stood out. There was a family hoping for a baby girl. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could feel them. Their longing was warm and sincere. They felt gentle, safe, kind. And I especially remember the father's wish. It was so strong and tender, this quiet hope for a daughter. That was the family I chose. And once I chose them, everything began to change. I remember movement. Not falling exactly, more like being pulled downward, slowly, gently, toward that blue world. I felt myself becoming heavier somehow, more focused, smaller. My awareness narrowed, like I was entering a tiny room after being part of something wide and endless. Then the next memory begins. I was a baby. I was lying down, staring at a ceiling. That is one of the funniest parts to me now, because I remember being aware, but not able to do anything. I couldn't sit. I couldn't stand. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think in proper words yet. I was just there, looking up at the ceiling, wondering in my own baby way why I was doing nothing but staring. I remember moving my hands and feet, kicking a little, feeling motion, feeling trapped and fascinated at the same time, because suddenly I had a body, and the body was mine, but I had no idea how to use it yet. And then there was the moment I touched something. That memory is incredibly strong. I remember realizing I could feel matter, texture, pressure, resistance, solidness. It amazed me. It was like discovering, through my own tiny hands, what real meant. Something could push back. Something could have shape. Something could be touched. Everything felt new, sharp, physical, so intensely real. I'm not sharing this because I want to convince anyone of a belief. I'm not trying to prove anything. I know there are people who will say memory is strange, that the mind can create things, that children absorb ideas without realizing it. Maybe. But I had these memories before I knew Earth was round, before I knew it was mostly covered in water, before I learned about God, angels, spirits, souls, or anything like that, before I understood what wishing meant, before I even really understood what a family was. I didn't grow up surrounded by mystical stories either. I started watching television when I was around 6, and most of what I watched was the news with my dad. I mostly remember him getting angry at the screen and cursing about corrupt politicians. So, not exactly a magical childhood curriculum. But because of these memories, when I learned about God at church around the age of 7, something in me responded deeply. It felt less like being introduced to an idea and more like hearing a name for something I had already brushed against. Still, I don't claim to know what it all means. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was imagination. Maybe it was something the mind made, or something the soul carried, or something I won't understand until much later. I'm honestly okay with not knowing. I just know that I have remembered it for as long as I have remembered being alive. And because of it, no matter what life throws at me, some quiet part of me feels like I agreed to be here, like I chose this planet, this family, this strange, difficult, beautiful life. And someday, in the very, very distant future, when my time here is done, maybe I'll meet that voice again. If I do, I think I'll tell them everything. I'll say, Earth was intense. Humans were complicated. The food was great. The heartbreak was unnecessary, but memorable. Overall, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. And then I'd probably add, highly recommended for workaholics, greedy people, and anyone who needs a very dramatic course in humility. Before I get into this, I want to explain something about myself. I collect antiques. I've been doing it for a little over 6 years now, so I'm not exactly new to the feeling that certain objects can carry something with them. I know that might sound strange to some people, but when you spend enough time around old things, you start to notice that not everything is just wood, porcelain, fabric, or dust. Some pieces feel quiet. Some feel warm. Some feel heavy. And then there's this doll. I call her Maribel. She's a German bisque doll, probably from around the late 1930s or early 1940s, at least from what I can tell. I found her at an antique mall I visit pretty often. I brought her home on June 28, 2025. Usually, when I'm antiquing and something catches my eye, I don't buy it right away. I'll carry it around the store for a while and sort of sit with its energy. If it feels wrong or unsettled, I quietly tell it I'm going to leave it behind, and then I put it back. With Maribel, I did the same thing. And at the time, I didn't feel anything alarming. No shift in the air, no pressure, no sudden urge to put her down. Honestly, I thought she was beautiful. I've been wanting to add more dolls to my collection because I only had a few, and she felt like exactly the kind of piece I'd been hoping to find. So I bought her, brought her home, and placed her on one of my shelves. I've always been sensitive to spirit presence. That's been part of my life since I was little. As I've gotten older, I've become more comfortable allowing that kind of energy in my space, as long as there's respect on both sides. I treat my antiques carefully, almost like they're guests in my home. To me, old objects have stories. Maybe not always spirits, but definitely stories. About a week after I brought Maribel home, I started dealing with intense dizziness and this awful mental fog. It felt like vertigo mixed with deep brain fatigue. I am getting medical help for it, so I want to be clear that I'm not asking anyone to diagnose me or anything like that. But part of me keeps wondering if the timing means something. Earlier today, I sat down with Maribel and used dowsing rods. I kept the questions simple. She didn't answer everything, but she did respond to a few. I asked, "Are you making me anxious right now?" The answer was yes. Then I asked, "Are you doing it on purpose?" No answer. I asked, "Is my energy clashing with yours?" She said no. Then I asked, "Is your energy clashing with my mother's?" She said yes. And the reason I asked that is because my mother has never liked this doll. She's also spiritually sensitive, and she told me recently that a photo memory popped up on her phone from the day I bought Maribel. It was a picture of me holding the doll, and she said the moment she saw it again, something in her told her there was something wrong with it. She said that since the day I brought Maribel home. I tried not to take it too seriously at first because I know everyone feels antiques differently. Something that feels perfectly fine to me might make someone else uneasy. But my mother is usually right when she says something feels off. Not always, but often enough that I pay attention. After the dowsing session, I asked Maribel if she would be all right with me moving her into another room for the night, just to see whether the energy in my bedroom changed. I cleansed my room, and after getting what felt like permission, I moved her out to the back storage room and cleansed her too. And honestly, the difference was immediate. My room felt lighter, calmer, less crowded somehow. I'm used to spirits making noise or trying to get my attention. That doesn't scare me. But every time something feels strange in my room, my eyes go straight to Maribel. Not because I think she looks creepy, and not because I'm afraid of dolls. It's more automatic than that. Like some part of me notices her before I even understand why. That's what bothers me. I don't know whether I should give her to someone else or trust what she seems to be telling me, that she isn't here to cause harm. I don't really believe in coincidences, and I can't ignore the fact that I brought her home only about a week before the vertigo and fatigue started. I also don't want to be disrespectful. I brought her home knowing there was always a chance she could have something attached to her. I don't want to just toss her away like she's garbage. That feels wrong to me. She has also indicated that she wouldn't be upset if I gave her away, but I still feel conflicted. So I guess I'm asking this gently. Has anyone dealt with something like this before? How do you know when an object is just carrying heavy energy, and when it's something you truly need to remove from your space? Because I don't hate Maribel. I don't even want to get rid of her. I just want to understand what she brought with her. I've had a few strange things happen in this house, and honestly, something happened just now that made me want to finally talk about it. I'll say this first. I don't fully believe in ghosts. Not completely. I'm not the kind of person who jumps straight to haunted every time a floorboard creaks. But there are things that have happened here that I still can't explain, no matter how many normal excuses I try to give them. So I'll start with the smaller things and work up to the one that really scared me. Sometimes I'll smell someone nearby, almost like a person has just walked past me. But when I go looking, there's nobody there. That one isn't too scary, I know, but it's still weird when you're home and suddenly it feels like someone else is standing close. Other times I'll hear footsteps moving through the house, or I'll hear a door shut somewhere. And when I check, everything is empty. I usually just tell myself it's the house settling or being dramatic. That helps a little. I've also had moments where I think I see a face or a shadow out of the corner of my eye. Then I turn around and, of course, nothing is there. One of the creepier things is the singing outside my window at night. It sounds like a woman humming, or maybe mumbling some kind of song I don't recognize. It's soft, but close enough to make me get up and look. I live out in the country, though I do have neighbors, so every time it happens I check because my first thought is, please let this just be some random person and not someone trying to break in. But every time, there's nobody outside. There's also knocking at the back door sometimes. It happens during the day and at night, but not very often. Still, when you open the door and nobody is there, it leaves this cold little feeling in your chest. Then there was what happened just a moment ago, which is what made me want to share all of this. My boyfriend Eli told me he felt like he was being watched in the kitchen. I was in my game room, so I kind of brushed it off and told him he was probably fine. Then he started walking back toward his room, and I watched him because I was hoping I could make a creepy face and scare him. But while he was walking away, I saw the shadow of a person appear on the hallway wall near my room. It moved by itself, like an actual human shadow walking, and then it disappeared right at my doorway. That one got me. Another thing that really bothers both of us is the doors. We've watched doors open by themselves. In our bedroom, we've seen the door handle move on its own. We actually have to lock the bedroom door, because if we don't, it'll open and shut during the night. The closet door in that room is even worse because it doesn't lock. We have to put a big, heavy storage bin in front of it. Most of the time that works, but every now and then, the bin will be shifted, and the closet door will just swing open. The bin moving is rare, but when it happens, it feels very deliberate. And then there's the scariest thing that has happened to me so far. One night, my friend Mira was staying over. We decided to go to bed, so I went into the bedroom and got under the covers, and she settled in the living room. Eli was in the kitchen making himself a snack. I turned the lights off and lay there waiting for him to come to bed. Then I heard the bedroom door handle move. I thought it was Eli, so I pretended to be asleep, hoping I could scare him when he came in. But the door never opened. I kept waiting. Then I heard something scurrying around on the floor near the bed. Before I could really react, I felt a hand slide under the blanket at the foot of the bed and grab my foot, like it was trying to tickle me. I kicked hard. I felt the weight of an arm drop off the bed, and I heard a small thud hit the floor. And immediately, I felt this awful sense of dread. I called out for Eli, thinking maybe I had kicked him by accident. But when I looked over the foot of the bed, nobody was there. I got up and walked out of the bedroom, and Eli was sitting in the kitchen eating a bowl of cereal. He looked completely confused when I asked him how he had done it. He told me he had never left the kitchen. Mira said the same thing. She had seen him there the whole time. So then I asked, then who just grabbed my foot? Neither of them had an answer. After that, Mira and I tried doing a little ghost hunting around the house. We didn't really find much, except for high EMF readings in the bedroom. Thankfully, nothing has grabbed me since then. But those are the strange things that have happened in this house so far. And honestly, I'm still trying to convince myself there's some normal explanation for all of it. I know this is going to sound strange, and honestly, I'm still not sure what to make of it. I've never had anything like this happen before, so I'm really just trying to get some outside perspective. It started about 3 nights ago, and since then, it's been happening pretty consistently. Or maybe I'm just noticing it more now because I'm paying attention. For context, I'm a musician. I live with my 2 older brothers and my sister-in-law, and all of them play music too. So our house is full of instruments: guitars, a keyboard, amps, cases, all of that. We keep most of it in one spare room. We also have a house rule: no playing instruments inside after midnight. If somebody gets the urge to play that late, they either wait until morning or go outside. It's just something we agreed on because, well, nobody wants to be jolted awake by a guitar solo at 1 in the morning. The first time it happened, I was home by myself. I was sitting in the living room watching TV when I heard a guitar coming from the instrument room. And I don't mean one string randomly vibrating or something falling over. I mean someone was playing it. It was this steady little rhythm, almost like a simple melody. Not amazing, not anything complicated, but it had structure. It sounded intentional. I remember sitting there for a second, just frozen, trying to convince myself I was hearing something from the TV. But I muted it, and the guitar was still going. So I got up and went to the room. Nobody was there. Just the instruments, sitting exactly where they always are. I checked behind the door. I even checked the closet, which felt ridiculous while I was doing it, but I needed some kind of explanation. There was nothing. No one. The second time happened the next day after I got out of the shower. The bathroom is right across the hall from that same room. I had just opened the door and stepped out when I heard it again. Same kind of guitar strumming, same rhythm or close to it. This time I wasn't alone in the house, but I was the only one upstairs, and I know that because I called out, and everyone answered from downstairs. Then today, it happened again, only this time it wasn't the guitar. It was my keyboard. Again, it wasn't like some polished performance. It sounded simple, almost hesitant, but there was definitely a tune there. A few notes, a pause, then a few more, like someone was trying to figure out a melody by ear. And the last time I heard it, there was something else too. A voice. It sounded high-pitched, almost feminine. I couldn't make out the words at all. It was too soft or maybe too muffled. But I know I heard someone speaking. That's the part that's really been bothering me. I keep trying to come up with normal explanations. Maybe the house is making noises. Maybe something electronic is glitching. Maybe one of the instruments is somehow picking up interference. I don't know, but the sounds don't feel random. They feel played. And that's what I can't get past. So yeah, I know this sounds odd. I know how it probably comes across. But I'm honestly just looking for thoughts, theories, anything that might help me make sense of it. I'm not completely sure how to say this without sounding dramatic, but for a long time, I've had this feeling that something is attached to my family. Not just me, my family. We've always believed in the paranormal, or at least we've been open to it. It was never something we laughed off completely. And I guess to understand why this has stayed with me, you'd need to know a little about how I grew up. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, though they're all half-siblings. I'm the only child my mom and dad had together. When I was little, strange things were just part of life. Not every single day, but often enough that it didn't feel random. I remember being around 5 years old and seeing these dark figures. Not quick little shadows out of the corner of my eye either. These would stay long enough for me to stare at them and know I was seeing something. I had a really hard time sleeping back then too. I slept in my parents' bed until I was almost done with elementary school because being alone at night felt impossible. At first, I told my sisters what I was seeing. They acted like they didn't believe me, probably because they didn't want to scare me more than I already was. Years later, though, they admitted they had believed me the whole time, and they had their own experiences. My sisters dealt with things that felt almost cruel. Sleep paralysis, red-eyed figures, shadows in rooms, that awful feeling of being singled out by something you can't explain. One time, we were all at my aunt's house, just sitting on the couch, when a decoration suddenly fell from a shelf and hit one of my sisters right on the head. The shelf was secure. It was nailed in properly. The decoration wasn't round, and there was no reason for it to slide off. Things like that happened more than once. We also had drawers opening on their own, though I'll admit that might have just been because the old dresser we kept passing between us was uneven. I try to be fair about it. I don't want to blame every little thing on ghosts. But then there are the things I can't explain. For me, dreams have always been strange. A lot of the time, I don't dream at all. But when I do, they can be incredibly vivid, almost like little flashes of places I've never been. Then weeks or months later, I'll find myself standing in that exact place with that same feeling in my stomach. Other nights, I wake up from a completely dreamless sleep in a cold sweat, confused and panicked. When that happens, I sometimes see things in the dark. Shadows mostly. But the strangest one is always the same. Wasps. I'll be lying there, absolutely convinced there are wasps flying around my room. Always wasps. Never bees. Never flies. Just wasps. I've also always had strong gut feelings. I know that sounds vague, but I'll get this heavy, awful feeling before something bad happens. Not every time, but enough that I notice it. More recently, there was one day during summer break when I was home alone. I woke up, went through my normal morning routine, brushed my hair, cleaned my glasses, used the bathroom, and then went downstairs to sit on the couch. A few seconds later, I heard the toilet flush upstairs. At first, I told myself I was just imagining it because I had just been in the bathroom. But then I heard the water running through the pipes afterward. That sound was real. I stayed downstairs the entire day and refused to go back up until my parents got home. There are also stories from when I was a toddler. Apparently, I was sitting in my car seat near the bottom of the stairs while my family was getting ready to go somewhere. Suddenly, I started waving and pointing toward the top of the stairs, repeating, "Grandpa." But my grandfather had already passed away. And that wasn't the only time something like that happened when I was small. I also remember my mom showing me pictures from when she was younger, and in some of them, she and her friends were using a Ouija board. I don't know whether that matters. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I've never forgotten it. The part that bothers me most is the feeling. It's this constant sense that I'm being followed or watched, or that I'm not fully safe in my own home. It gets worse when I'm alone, especially in my parents' room. There's something about that space that makes my whole body tense. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe there's some logical explanation for all of it. But sometimes I wonder if this is a curse, or if I'm losing my mind, or if my family just has some kind of strong spiritual connection we don't understand. I really don't know. All I know is that the feeling has been with me for as long as I can remember. Looking back, I think we moved out of that house around 2019, maybe a little before then. My mom wanted to start fresh and move in with her partner, and honestly, I was relieved when we finally left. It was just me and my mom living there for years, probably since around 2011. I was still young when we moved in, but even then, I remember the house never felt right. It had this heavy feeling to it, the kind you can't really explain without sounding dramatic. My mom felt it too, though she didn't always admit it at the time. One of the first strange things happened right after we moved in. My auntie, Lauren, was helping us sort out my bedroom and carry things into the house. At one point, she and my mom stepped outside into the garden for a cigarette. From the garden, you could see through these big, clear windows into the dining room, and from there, you could see the archway that led into the living room. My auntie suddenly went quiet. Then she turned to my mom and said she'd just seen a man standing in the middle of that archway. My mom panicked straight away and ran inside, but there was nobody there. No open door, no sign of anyone getting in, nothing out of place, and my auntie didn't recognize the man at all. After that, little things kept happening. We used to hear creaking on the landing and the stairs all the time, day and night. My mom would always say, "It's just the house settling," and I believed her because I wanted to. But after we moved out, she admitted she only told me that so I wouldn't be scared. She said she knew something was wrong in that house. The stairs were the worst for me. I always hated standing at the bottom and looking up. It felt like something was watching from the top. Sometimes we'd catch these dark shapes or shadows out of the corner of our eyes, but we'd always blame it on being tired or imagining things. Then things got worse. My mom had a friend, Mark, who passed away suddenly, and she had been to his funeral. A few days after that, the atmosphere in the house changed. It felt more intense, more unsettled. One morning, my mom dropped me off at school like normal. Nothing strange had happened before we left, but when she came back home, the house was tidy except for her bedroom. Her room had been completely trashed. Her underwear was all over the floor. Jewelry had been pulled out and scattered everywhere. Drawers were emptied. Shoes were thrown around. Clothes had been ripped from hangers. She had this big wardrobe with several little doors, and every single one of them was wide open. The strangest part was that nothing was missing. She checked the whole house. No broken windows, no forced doors, no sign of anyone getting in. Everything that had been thrown around was still there. It was just everywhere, like someone had done it to frighten her. A little while after that, something happened with her glasses. She went to put them on one morning, and when she picked them up, they were snapped perfectly in the middle. The night before, they had been completely fine. We tried to come up with normal explanations, but none of them made sense. We didn't have pets then. Nobody else had been in her room. I hadn't touched them, and they weren't bent or crushed like someone had stepped on them. They were broken so cleanly, almost like they had been cut. Then we started finding this weird green slime along the tops of the door frames. That still bothers me. I wasn't a slime kid. I didn't own any slime, and at that time it wasn't really something I played with anyway. It was also way too high for either of us to reach easily. My mom is only about 5'3", and the door frames were much taller than that. There were more things that happened, but my mom brushed a lot of it off as coincidence and didn't always tell me everything. I think she was trying to protect me from being even more scared than I already was. But that house was strange. It never felt like we were alone there. I'm so glad we moved out. Sometimes I still wonder about the people who live there now, and whether they've ever felt it too. I'm 58 years old, and until this happened, I had never seen anything I would call a ghost. Not once. I wasn't the kind of person who went looking for things like that either. But after Martin died, something in my life shifted in a way I still don't fully understand. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 4 years. He had moved on, married someone else, and I had tried to keep living my life. But when I found out he had passed away, it broke something open in me. His funeral was streamed online, and I watched it over and over again. Not all at once, but enough times that I lost count. I was grieving so deeply that sometimes just thinking of him made these sounds come out of me, like my heart was crying before I could stop it. Around that same time, my little grandson got sick with some kind of virus, and I caught it from him. It knocked me down hard. I was in bed for 2 days, barely able to eat. I think all I managed was a couple of pieces of toast, some fruit, and water. On the second morning, I opened my eyes, and there he was. Martin's head was floating in the air near my bed. I just stared at him. He stared right back at me. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. He looked over toward the wall for a moment, even though there was nothing there, and then he looked back at me. We stayed like that, just looking at each other, until he slowly drifted away and disappeared. I was so shaken I couldn't even get out of bed. I stayed there frozen until my daughter came into the room, and when I finally told her what I saw, she didn't laugh. She just said, "I believe you." And I needed that more than I can explain. The next morning, I was half asleep when it felt like someone hit me in the face. I woke up fast, but nobody was there. I wondered if I had dreamed it, but then the sightings kept happening. Back at home, I started seeing his head floating around my room. At first, I got emotional when I saw him. I wasn't really scared. It felt more sad than anything, like my grief had taken shape and was moving through the air. But then it changed. One night, I realized it wasn't just one head. There were several. 3 of them were near the foot of my bed, watching me. Others appeared along the wall. One looked almost animal-like, with a lion's face. Another looked like a woman. One looked like someone I used to know years ago. And then there was Martin again. I remember thinking, what in the world is going on? After that, things got stranger. I would wake up and something would be right in my face, moving its tongue near me or breathing this strange green mist toward me. I was exhausted and desperate for rest, so one night I took my regular medicine and a sleeping pill, hoping I could finally sleep through it. But instead, it felt like I was shown something. I saw the figure rise toward the light on my ceiling fan, and then it began to form a body. First the spine, then the arms, then the ribs and chest. It was like watching a skeleton become real piece by piece. Inside the chest was this purplish blue glow, with tiny white sparks flickering like little fireworks. And even though I was frightened, part of me was amazed. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Then the image changed. I saw him on the wall, full-bodied now, struggling with a huge snake. It looked like an anaconda. He fought it, but he couldn't win. The snake bit his head off and swallowed it, and I watched his head move down through the snake's body until the whole scene shifted again into something intimate and disturbing with a woman. I was stunned, completely stunned. This has been going on since January. I've gone to a mental health doctor because I needed to know if something was wrong with me, if I was losing my mind, or if grief had done something to me that I couldn't control. All I know is this: I want it gone now. Him, them, whatever it is. I have asked them to leave. I have commanded them to leave. I have rebuked them. I have prayed. And at this point, I truly don't know what else to do. It happened late one night while I was home with my partner. She had gone to sleep earlier than me, and I just couldn't settle down. I didn't want to wake her with the TV or the light from my phone, so I quietly left the bedroom and went into the living room. Now, I should say, I've used substances before. Usually nothing too extreme, just enough to shift my headspace a little. But that night, I made the choice to take more than I normally would. I think I was chasing something deeper, something stronger than usual. So I sat down on the couch, put my headphones on, and started watching videos about spiritual awakening, consciousness, hidden realities, that kind of thing. At first, everything felt normal. Then suddenly, it didn't. I remember feeling like reality itself started to loosen around me. It wasn't like seeing random shapes or colors. It felt bigger than that. It felt like the room was unfolding, almost like the 3 dimensions I understood were bending open, making space for something else to come through. And then, I realized I didn't know where I was anymore. The living room was gone, or maybe it was still there, but I couldn't make sense of it. Space didn't behave the way it was supposed to. Nothing lined up. That's when someone, or something, took my hand. The figure looked almost human, but not quite. It seemed like it was made from smooth, pale stone, gray and polished, like a statue that had somehow learned how to move. It told me not to be afraid. It said I was with them. Then it guided me into what looked like a room. Inside, there were 5 more beings just like it. All of them had that same gray, sculpted look. Even their hair didn't look like real hair. It was more like rounded patterns carved into their heads, almost decorative. And when they noticed me, they started speaking Spanish. But the strange thing was, they weren't speaking to me. They just kept talking among themselves, like I was barely worth acknowledging. Like I had wandered into a place where I wasn't supposed to matter. They were arguing about who would be next to intervene. I didn't understand everything they said, but I understood enough to feel deeply unsettled. From what I gathered, they were taking turns interfering with human timelines. They were trying to create events that people like us would interpret as miracles, and to them, it was a game. They were betting on who could influence a life, shift an outcome, or create something impossible enough that humans would believe it was divine. Whoever succeeded would win some kind of token. I remember seeing it clearly. It looked almost like a pine cone, except it was the same flat gray color as they were, like it had been carved from the same strange stone. After a while, I started feeling wrong there. Not scared exactly, more like I was out of place, out of rhythm. Like my presence in that space was a mistake that was beginning to correct itself. Then everything started breaking apart. Their world and my living room began overlapping, flickering through each other like bad reception. Shapes blurred, walls folded into shadows. The figures started dissolving into pieces of my own reality. And then, without understanding how it happened, I was back on my couch. The headphones were still on. The room was quiet. My partner was still asleep. I just sat there for a long time, trying to breathe normally and make sense of what I had experienced. And the thought that stayed with me was not comforting. It was this feeling that there may be things out there far beyond us, things capable of reaching into our lives in ways we can't even recognize. And maybe, to them, what we call miracles are just moves in a game we don't even know we're playing. I grew up in the Bronx, and for a long time, that was the only home I really knew. But when I was around 10, my mother packed up me and my brother and moved us way up to northern New York. The reason was heavy. My father's killer had been released from prison, and my mom had family up there, so she wanted distance, safety, a fresh start, or at least something close to one. A few years after that, my grandfather sold his place back in the Bronx and came up to be near us. He bought a house on the north side of town, not far from the river, and eventually we all moved in with him. The house itself looked normal. It was a nice double-wide prefab with an added extension and garage. Out back, there were sliding glass doors that led to a cement patio with a wooden roof over it. Beyond that was maybe half an acre of yard, an above-ground pool with a wooden deck, and a big tool shed near the woods. The whole property ended where the tree line began, and almost as soon as we moved in, something felt off. At first, it wasn't dramatic. Nothing flew across the room. No voices whispered from closets. It was just this feeling, especially at night, that something was watching from the woods. As I got older, it became harder to ignore. In the winter, I would find footprints in the snow going all the way around the house. They would stop in front of every window, facing inward. At the time, I thought maybe we had a stalker. Honestly, that seemed like the least terrifying explanation. In high school, I met my best friend, who I'll call Chris. He wasn't just someone I hung out with. He was the first person in that town who really had my back. I didn't have many friends there. A lot of people treated me like I didn't belong because I was Hispanic and from New York City. But Chris stood up for me when nobody else did. We started exploring the woods behind the house. Those woods always had a strange feeling to them, but we were teenagers, so of course we kept going back. We even built this awful little structure out of fallen logs and called it the fort. We would hang out there, goof around, sometimes pretend we were on some grand adventure. One day, while wandering deeper than usual, we found this weird pit in the ground. I still don't know why, but we decided to dig into it. After maybe 3 feet, we hit something metal. It turned out to be a buried shopping cart, and it looked like it was blocking some kind of crude tunnel. That scared us badly enough that we left right away. We said we would come back the next summer, but when we tried, we either couldn't find the spot again, or it had been covered over. Later, when we were a little older, we started doing the kind of dumb stuff teenage guys do. Sometimes we would sneak a beer or two from the fridge and go drink them in a smaller shed my grandfather had built near the edge of the woods. We just called it the shed. Outside that shed, I dug a fire pit into the dirt and circled it with rocks. That was when things really started changing. One night, Chris and I were inside the shed when we heard footsteps outside. Not just random animal sounds. It sounded like someone walking around the walls. Chris heard it too. We both went quiet and looked at each other with that silent, awful question. Are you hearing this? Then the footsteps stopped, and something started pounding on the walls. We froze. I don't know how long we sat there without making a sound. It felt endless. When the banging finally stopped and we thought it was safe, we ran back to the house and locked every door behind us. You'd think that would have been enough to keep us away from the shed. It wasn't. We kept going back. Maybe we were curious. Maybe we were stupid. Maybe, after a while, fear starts to feel familiar if you live beside it long enough. Most nights we would hear rustling or footsteps. Some nights the banging came back. Eventually, as strange as this sounds, it became part of the routine. Then one night, we saw it. It was probably after midnight. We had a fire going outside the shed. The house was off to our left, the shed was to our right, and the tree line was in front of us. I heard rustling ahead. When I looked up, my whole body locked. There was a figure standing in the trees. It was tall, too tall, thin in a way that looked wrong. It seemed naked, but its skin was so dark that it didn't look like skin at all. There was no texture, no detail. It was like a piece of the night had peeled itself loose and stood upright. And it had no face, no eyes, no mouth. Nothing. It leaned forward slowly, like it was studying us. For a second I thought, this is it. I finally lost my mind. Then I realized Chris was already running for the house, so I ran too. That was the first time, but it wasn't the last. After that, we saw it more than once, usually on nights when we had a fire going. Eventually, we stopped using the fire pit and started using this old rusty chimenea the previous owners had left on the patio, but it didn't matter. Fire seemed to draw it in. When we were older, Chris started dating the girl I'll call Valeria. She came over a lot, and there's one night with her that I'll never forget. I was in my bedroom. Chris was taking a shower across the hall. Valeria was in the dining room, just outside my door to the right. Near the bathroom, there was a little laundry room with a back door that opened onto a small wooden porch leading down to the patio. We always kept that door locked. I was sitting in my room when I heard a massive crash, followed by Valeria screaming. I ran out, and she was standing there pale, pointing toward the laundry room. She yelled, "Something busted it open!" The back door was wide open. I know this next part was reckless. I know it. But in that moment, I was terrified, and I felt sure that whatever had been watching us had finally decided to come inside. I grabbed my grandfather's little .22 rifle and fired into the woods, away from the houses, yelling at whatever was out there. By then, Chris had come out of the bathroom in a towel, and he screamed, "What are you doing? If that's a person, you could kill them." And the way he said it stuck with me. If that's a person. Because that meant he was thinking the same thing I was. It wasn't. Years later, after I graduated, and after Chris and Valeria had split up, I started dating a girl I'll call Noelle. That matters because of what happened later. One night near the end of winter, I stepped outside the sliding doors to smoke. While I was standing there, I heard what sounded like an old musket going off. At the same time, snow exploded out from the tree line, like something huge had blasted through it. I ran inside, and instead of calling the police like a normal person, I called Chris. He came over, and we grabbed rifles and flashlights and searched the woods. We found nothing. No person. No tracks. Not a single footprint in the snow anywhere near where the blast had come from. That bothered me for a long time. A few months later, Noelle and I got closer, and I finally told her about everything that had happened on the property. I expected her to think I was out of my mind. She didn't. She just said she wanted to see it for herself. I told her it seemed to show up more often when we had fires, so she suggested we invite a couple of her friends over and sit out on the patio with the chimenea going. That night, we were all outside, laughing, talking, trying to keep things light. The chairs were facing the tree line. The fire was burning. At some point, I glanced toward the shed. And there it was. It was walking along the tree line, moving from the shed toward the house. Not rushing, not hiding, just walking. And I remember almost smiling because a strange thought hit me. This is the moment I find out if I'm crazy or not. It passed right in front of us, turned its head toward where we were sitting, and then kept moving along the edge of the house. I didn't say anything. I just turned to look at Noelle. Her face said everything. She was pale, eyes wide, jaw slightly open, staring in the exact direction where I had seen it. Then she shouted and ran inside. We never had another fire together after that. A few weeks later, we went to a Civil War reenactment at a local state park. While we were there, I found a book about local history. I started flipping through it and came across a story about the indigenous people who had lived in that area before the town existed. According to the book, there had been a longhouse near the river. One night, French soldiers came down the river and burned it with people still inside. On the next page, there was an old map showing the approximate location. I recognized it immediately. The river on the map was the same river across the road from our property, and the longhouse, or at least where they believed it had stood, was practically right where we lived. That was when everything clicked into place for me. The land, the fires, the thing in the woods, the feeling of being watched, the way it seemed to appear when flames were burning. I don't know what I believe with absolute certainty, but I know what I saw, and I know what that place felt like. The ending of it all still haunts me. A few years later, I had failed out of college and was living back with my grandfather. I was in a rough place then, drinking too much, not taking care of myself the way I should have been. One day, I drank heavily and passed out. I should mention that our smoke alarms didn't work. I woke up suddenly from a dead sleep, completely alert, with this strange, urgent feeling in my body. I walked out of my room and saw my grandfather in the kitchen trying to fight a huge fire on the stove. He was about to throw water on it, but I stopped him. It was a grease fire. I grabbed salt and smothered the flames. Then I looked up and saw something that made my stomach drop. The inside of the vent fan was glowing, and the fan was still running. I knew we had to get out. I grabbed the wireless house phone and got my grandfather outside. But when I tried to call 911, the phone was dead. So I did something stupid. I ran back in. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see. I had to move by memory, one hand out, choking on the air, with the kitchen glowing through the haze behind me. I made it to my room and searched for the other phone. I shook a blanket, saw a tiny glimmer of light reflect off the screen, grabbed it, and ran back outside. I called 911, but I barely got the words out before the line went dead from the fire. Later, they told us the ventilation above the stove had plastic parts inside. Even though I put out the visible fire, it had already spread. The plastic melted. The insulation caught. They said we had maybe 2 minutes. If I hadn't woken up when I did, my grandfather and I would have died in that house. We never went back to the property after that. And I know how this sounds. I know there are parts of it that people will try to explain away. I've tried to do that myself. But there's something deeply unsettling about almost burning to death in that house, on that land, after everything that happened there. To this day, I believe it was all connected. And I believe what we saw in those woods was a Wendigo.